Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning. Welcome to the show. It's just coming up 3 minutes past 10 o'clock on this, lovely, beautiful Monday morning. Hope it's nicer where you are than where it is right now down here in London. Hope you had a great weekend. Thank you very much, for joining us here at Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. And whether you're listening on DB Plus Radio, on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube, or your connected device, fabulous as always to have your company. An awful lot to talk about as per usual. I'm with you live until 1 o'clock. If you miss anything from the show or miss anything from last week's show, want to go back and have a look at, you can go to my YouTube page called the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. You hit subscribe, you never have to miss a thing. Coming up on this show in this hour, we're going to be talking about the latest from the deadly protests in Iran. Will the US act? Donald Trump said he'd act. And will Britain help? Should Britain help? Love to hear your thoughts, particularly on that. Plus, MPs are set to call for the sacking of the West Midlands police chief for misleading Parliament over the Maccabi Tel Aviv fan ban. I still can't get over the fact that guy's still in a job. I can't get over the fact that guy's still in a job since November. But there we are. Over my dead body does he continue in his job by the end of the month. Frankly, by the end of the day. But it's certainly, fingers crossed, for the end of the week. Shall we hope for that at very least? Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of the big stories. In particular, I would like to hear your thoughts on Iran. Should Britain get involved? Should America do anything at all to help those protesters? More than 500 now believed to have died, being killed, brutally killed by the crackdown by the Iranian mullahs regime. We were told, they were massively, massively weakened by those strikes by Israel and America last year. But they are certainly still able, after putting the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, into the streets of Iran to crack down on those protests. But those protesters still keep on coming out. Do we have a duty of care to these people? They're fighting just for the most basic level of human rights, for freedom, for prosperity, just to live the life that we want to live. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Should we get involved? In particular, what should Donald Trump do? He said he would take action to help them. He warned the mullahs. He said, if you start killing people en masse, we will take action. Well, when it was 50, he wasn't acting. We're now pretty sure it's over 500. It's probably much higher than that, given that there is a complete blackout in telecommunications. We're looking at, 1% of communications up. Unless you've got access to Starlink, which Elon Musk has provided over Iran, you're not getting information out. Things are coming out often 12 hours a day, 2 days later. But there's no doubt there has been a brutal crackdown. There has been shooting. There has been mass executions on the street by the mullahs Revolutionary Guard. So, should Donald Trump take action? If so, what should he do? And crucially, should we get involved? I want to hear your thoughts. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text the word TALK in your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. But as always, get in touch about anything you want to talk about. There's lots of other big topics in town. Delighted to say, great day to have him back in the studio. Always good to have you here Monday morning. Conservative commentator Benedict Spence joining us. A very, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Julia.
Now, one of the reasons we've always enjoyed having you on the show is that you are very knowledgeable about international affairs. You'll often end up raising something, a country, frankly, none of us have ever heard of, that's relevant to the story. But, wow, there is an awful, awful lot to talk about today in terms of what is going on with Iran. Look, we still have the issues with Greenland, we've got issues with Venezuela, and now Cuba, apparently, with Donald Trump. Front pages, they're all dominated by these protests in Iran. First of all, what do you think is happening there? And second of all, should Trump take action?
What's happening is obviously that the protests are very deeply widespread and that this is going to be shaking the regime. There are going to be many questions about whether or not all of the security services at this moment in time are even completely on board with the idea of regime suppression. Obviously, the majority of them will be, the hardliners will be. This is a deeply indoctrinated country, especially when it comes to its security services, that rewards loyalty and is very brutal towards any kind of dissent. So we must be clear, this is not not the same, say, as Venezuela, where lots of soldiers just sort of stood by because they live in abject poverty. One thing that the regime does is it pays its soldiers very well. Now,
and it was very crucial they put the IRGC on the ground, because basically they're more likely to be willing to shoot their own nationals.
It's part of the reason that the country itself is so poor. It should be a paradise on earth with all of the amount of natural resources it has. It funnels all of its money, into the security services and into foreign organisations like Hezbollah. That's why it's so poor, but that's why it's able to maintain itself. Should we get involved? We won't get involved until there's a sort of a critical point, until it seems that the regime is starting to wobble. If there's actual weakness, at which point we can get involved and potentially push it over the edge. Up until that point, actually it would be a bad idea to do so, because then you simply risk a lot of people getting caught up in the crossfire, and potentially if the regime is not unsure of itself, it's pretty certain that it's going to stand firm, then it will just start shooting people, whether they are special forces or foreign planes or protesters.
But that's it. Depends what kind of help we're getting, like bombing, bombing their military sites so that they can't, bomb Israel is a very different thing from stopping them going out on the streets with weapons. But there is that argument also that they, of course, will all claim it, and they have claimed that, some of these protesters are killing each other. They're not shy about these body bags in the morgues. They go, the protests are killing each other. But they're also saying, this is down to America. This is down to the West.
Well, to Mossad is the big takeaways. They say it's all Israel's fault.
To be fair, I'm sure some Hollywood lovies will be claiming that soon too.
To be honest, there's a lot of truth in it. Actually, the Israelis have
done the Israelis,
the Israelis have spent a very long time putting plans in place for a potential war with Iran, and potential collapse of the regime. We saw this at how deeply they'd penetrated.
Because it is a threat to them.
Yeah, we'd seen how deeply they were able to penetrate Iranian military intelligence during the war between the two, and actually the number of assassinations that go on in that country. They are very prepared for this. But probably the West won't get the go-ahead until Israeli intelligence tells them you've got the go-ahead to actually move on this. The reality is, though, it is not as straightforward as simply taking out the hierarchy, because it is so ideologically indoctrinated. It is not that all of the population hates the regime. A lot of people who are, if you like, cradle to grave sort of ideologues are very in favour of the regime.
Because actually it's a Muslim country, but actually I've been reading lots of it, they suggest that actually something like 40% of the country is now secular.
It's a deeply complex country is the problem, and there are other minority religions as well but there is also the ethnic component as well. A lot of these protests in the past have not been about we hate the regime because you're oppressive because of Islam. It's because we are Balokis or we are Azeris or we are Kurds and we don't want to be part of this effectively leftover imperial structure.
It's always more complicated than we like to from the outside. Here's the thing, though, looking at it from the outside, from the perspective of the West, it is extraordinary. For two things. One is the celebs. All over Gaza. Weeping. Whether it's, your Gary Linekers, your Hollywood celebs and all of that. I mean, I was going to have a go at the people at the Golden Globes. No mention of Iran. To be fair, they didn't mention Gaza the last 3 years either. I give them credit for not doing politics on stage. So I'm sure there's some warning going, can you not do that? Because everyone hates it when you do that. But they're all pontificating. They're on their Insta accounts crying about, whatever the latest propaganda from Hamas is. But remarkably quiet about what's going on around, when this is quite clearly about the most fundamental human rights. And a lot of these uprising originally is kind of led by young women wanting basic freedoms, because we're all feminists now, aren't we?
But this is part of the irony, because a lot of celebrities do this sort of thing because they're fashionable and safe ideas, and they think that it's actually going to be good for their careers. I would have thought that given that Iran has a very large middle class, very educated middle class, much of it that wants to be secular, liberal and prosperous, that they'd be looking at that from a career perspective and going, those are a lot of people that are our kind of people. Why are we not, in fact, backing those? Whereas somewhere like Gaza, where actually the majority of the population voted for Hamas and was still pretty keen on keeping Hamas, very different kind of demographic. Exactly,
but also the other thing is the coverage we've seen in the West. Lots of criticism, particularly of the BBC, but other mainstream media organisations as well, not covering enough the Iran protests. To be fair, I wasn't talking about it very much. We were mentioning it in passing. It wasn't the front page news. We are an opinion station. We're talking about the big stories. There have been so many other big stories. Each day I've gone, should we talk about the Iranian protests? And we're looking at it. It's like, you know what? There are other more sort of immediate pressing topics like, we're going to invade Greenland or whatever. But it's really interesting, the BBC, where they have an entire staff out, out in that region to cover events in Iran. And one of their reasons for not covering things until they were basically completely embarrassed into having to cover it was, we can't get much information out. We can't verify information. Well, you didn't use that excuse when Hamas were pumping pushing out their propaganda from Gaza. You didn't have people on the ground in Gaza, and you happily put out every single thing the Hamas say. What I find amazing is apparently now they don't necessarily believe everything the Tehran government is saying, which is weird. Which is weird because they believed absolutely everything from the Hamas health ministry for 3 sodding years.
Yeah, when Tehran comes out and says it's all the Zionists, it's all Israel's fault, and they're all starting going, oh, well, maybe they're not being entirely truthful about this, and you're kind of thinking, wow, it took you a long time to catch on. But the irony about the coverage of the BBC is, and this is a sign actually of the dysfunction of the BBC, is that it's the English language part that has been failing. The BBC Persian department, which does sit in the same building, has been covering all of this quite extensively.
Well, you think, I mean, it is their job. I mean, that would be, you've got one job.
Well, exactly. It's one of the few things that the BBC does really well. It provides that sort of soft power coverage to countries where the media is controlled effectively by the state, where it's propaganda. They offer the alternative. So it's not true. The BBC in the English language service can't say, well, we can't get the information out because there's another department in the same building
literally
getting it all out.
There's not talk about whether or not Starmer should brand the Iranian Revolutionary Guard as terrorists and prescribe them. I can't really see the point of this. The whole point of prescription is about non-state terror groups. This is a state terror group. It is literally, you know, the state-run Revolutionary Guard. I don't see what difference that's going to make. Is that just is that just that classic lefty? I think the Tories are coming on this as well, and it's just nonsense. It doesn't matter, and it's just this sort of this left wing. Well, it's this Western idea that we do something so it matters. No, provide people with arms. Do something useful. Yeah,
it would have been a bit like prescribing the SS or the Hitler Youth. You know, it doesn't matter. The Allies are shooting them either way in that event. And the thing is, because we don't have particularly good relations with Iran, it is one of the ways that you are actually able to get information out of the country or start negotiating by not prescribing them, because ironically it is also used effectively as the diplomatic service with countries with which it doesn't have diplomatic ties. You know, that's partly how it is able to operate. It's rather clever how it's done, but it does mean that countries like us are in a bit of a bind where we go, well, we can't really ban them because they're the people we need to talk to. They're the only people in government that will actually talk to us. So it is rather smart, but, you know, banning it won't actually do anything, especially if it is in that country right now fighting for its existence. They're not going to be picking up the phone to us and saying, oh yes, chaps, we're sure, we'll stop shooting protesters because you say so, and you just have to sort of release a few of our captives. What's that going to do?
It's not how it works, no. Well, look, let's talk about things closer to home. And this is the thing, when a lot of people say, again, a lot of these issues like Venezuela, what's it got to do with us? And you realise the drug running and things, and then it's the narco-terrorism, and it's funding the terrorism in Lebanon, and and the Iranians are helping them with the oil, and blah, blah. And they're all linked. This axis of evil is real, it's not all made up, and they're all linked, and it always comes back to danger on our streets as well. And this is where we get down to Islamist thugs and threats on our streets. And this is where this Maccabi Tel Aviv policing row is still ongoing. Unbelievably, the Westminster Chief Constable Craig Guilford is still in a job and has not been cast out of polite society as well as his job. Lots of talk is going to be forced out this week when the Home Affairs Select Committee basically tells the Home Secretary, yeah, this guy's lied to us repeatedly, because he has. It is not possible to claim that he hasn't lied. You know, sue me any day of the week, Craig. I'm pretty sure I'm solid on this one. But the litany of lies. I was writing notes this morning about all the different, literally all the different lies. I've got a whole sheet of A4 of all the different lies that have been told by his police force or by him and his lieutenants in Parliament, lying in Parliament. That's effective. That's equivalent of lying in a court of law. Okay, it is that serious. Not that you should be doing it anyway. But basically they're going to say you're going to have to sack him. But there's some question marks over Shabana Mahmood about how early she knew about this Israeli fan ban. But the key thing here, this is like, you know, they claim basically it was all about safety concerns. There's this Europa League match between Maccabi Tel Aviv and Aston Villa in Birmingham. They claimed it was about safety concerns for everybody, particularly for Muslims, because these fans have got this really, really bad reputation. And there are some bad fans, as there are from lots of different football clubs. But basically, they decided on the ban before getting any evidence. They made up the evidence. They lied about evidence from the Amsterdam police from a previous match. Literally made up stuff, made up everything. They consulted mosques, but not Jewish community leaders, and then they lied about having consulted community leaders. One of the mosque leaders who was on the panel who had appointed and approved Craig Guilford as Chief Constable is one of the people they'd consulted. This is a mosque, by the way, where they've had speakers only recently who've said men should physically discipline their wives and wives shouldn't leave the house without their husband's permission. God, my husband would like me to go out of the house more often. They said they contacted the Israeli police for information, invited them to a meeting they didn't attend. The Israelis say we didn't know anything about this meeting. They covered up events on the night. They said it was peaceful when the actual match went ahead, despite the fact their own police logs show there were masked up groups, their words, masked up groups of up to 100 Asian youths looking for a fight in the days and hours beforehand. Basically, what happened is a bunch of Islamist thugs and activists told the police, we are going to cause trouble. There's going to be violence on the streets unless you ban these fans, because they didn't want a load of Israeli brackets Jews on the streets of Birmingham. It was a no-go area for Jews, is what they meant. And the police went, yes, sir, no, sir, 3 bags full for sir, and agreed to do it. And then they agreed to do it, and then they lied about the lies. And outrageously, this has happened in our second city in Birmingham.
Yeah.
Instead of arresting the people making the threats, they basically kowtowed to them and did their bidding. This is worse than the two-tier policing we've seen.
Well, I mean, there's a word for it, and let's say that this had taken part in New York and the community elders were all Italian gentlemen, we'd call it what it is, which is corruption.
Yep.
But the reality is, we can actually take all of that, because all of those things that you've said are basically bad enough. Every individual point should be a national scandal and cause for possibly senior officers, well, I say possibly, probably senior officers, lots of them, to lose their jobs. But the overarching thing here is all of the deception, all of the chicanery, everything is hiding one very basic truth. The police cannot do their job. They cannot enforce the law. They cannot uphold people's rights in Britain's second city, effectively. They are unable to fulfil that role. When you have that, and when they are lying and running around and spinning different stories to try to hide that fact, that is terrifying, because it is effectively saying law and order has broken down. Just because the violence hasn't broken out yet doesn't mean that it hasn't broken out. It has. In reality, there is nothing that they can do. And if a community decides it's going to kick off for all sorts of reasons, or it wants to do something, like say it decides it's going to build something, and it says, well, there's nothing you can do to stop us because there are that many of us and we're tooled up, or I don't know, we're going to hold a march.
We're going to have death threats against a little boy who dropped a crown. We're going to have death threats against a teacher who showed a...
we're going to get involved.
We're going to have a cinema showing a film we don't like.
Effectively, there is any criminal endeavour that they can get involved with that the police has now effectively said, we can't stop them doing that. That is the major scandal of all of this, and it should be, and it should cause special measures. A government cannot have its legitimacy challenged like that, and that is what we're talking about, the state having its legitimacy challenged by people in that situation.
There is only one organisation that is allowed to use force. And that is the state.
It is.
Using the police on our behalf. I mean, I'd like to use force to get Craig Guildford out of his job. I mean, this is just outrageous. Just very briefly, because genuinely, I don't care about this story, but it's on a lot of front pages. This is a Guantanamo detainee, Abu Zubaydah, the very first man subjected to the CIA's enhanced interrogation, torture techniques after the 9/11 attacks. He was claimed he was a senior Al-Qaeda member when he was taken by the Americans. They later withdrew that allegation. 20 years on, he is still at Guantanamo, in prison without trial. And the British government has now paid what we're told substantial, I dread to think how much, substantial compensation to this man, because we didn't torture him, we weren't involved in his rendition. However, we knew he'd been rendered, and we knew he was facing torture, but we carried on passing questions we wanted to know the answers to. This is MI5 and MI6. What do you make of this?
It's one of those where, because we simply don't know the nature of the allegations, and probably we never will in our lifetime, it's really hard actually to come to a basic, to a conclusion on this, because the US government has subsequently withdrawn any claims that he was ever a member of Al-Qaeda or that he was plotting anything, having said at the time he was a senior member. If they row back all the way on that and they say, well, he wasn't even a member, well, that has to cause very serious questions about what he's still doing there. But of course, he's still going to be there for he's not just being held because of embarrassment. They've released other people. So until we have that information, which you and I are not going to be privy to, it's really difficult to come to a conclusion. Why this might be irritating, though, for us, is because it means that all sorts of other people who were taken by the Americans may now also be able to bring legal compensations who we know were members of Al-Qaeda.
I'm just not entirely sure why it's got anything. I don't think people should be held and detained for long periods of time without... even in a wartime, without trial, and I've always thought that, but I just don't think this is our problem. I'm just like, we've got enough stuff on our plate. Thank you very much. Look, there's a lot of battles going on between the government and social media platforms. And I want to talk about those coming up very soon. But just in the short space of time we've got at the moment, Lord Manderson, who's not been speaking at all since his basically his sacking from, he'll say resigned, but he was forced out as our US ambassador to the UK, a job UK ambassador to the US, a job he should never have been appointed to because he'd been forced out of 2 previous jobs for lying. But he basically did his first interview with Guru Kunzberg yesterday, since then, basically saying he didn't know anything about Jeffrey Epstein's crimes against these teenage girls. And the argument he gave was basically, you know, he was kept basically unaware of this because he was gay. He refused to apologise because he says he didn't know. And he says he believed, even though he'd been convicted of a charge in 2008 of basically procuring an underage girl for prostitution, and he believed all that Jeffrey Epstein's claims of innocence. Is it remotely believable that Jeffrey Epstein did not let in his apparently best friend, Peter Mandelson, in on this, given that every documentary I've seen on this, every bit of evidence I've seen of this, suggested that these young girls, underage girls, were constantly in every home that he had, would be on his plane, were everywhere. You walk into his house in New York and there were just a whole array of young girls. He was using these young girls 2 or 3, 4 times a day. That's how much he was doing it. Yeah. And yet Peter Mandelson, because he was gay, wasn't involved and didn't know anything about it. It's an extraordinary justification.
I think Peter Mandelson doesn't realise that we have gone over the crest of peak woke, and it's not enough to simply say, I'm a special person with a special characteristic and you can't criticise me. Saying you're gay and that therefore you didn't know what was going on.
Also, we're not saying you did anything.
No, but saying that you don't know because of your sexual orientation. I don't see where the logic of that falls. Even during peak woke, I'm not quite sure that there would ever have been any logic, but that is the approach of a man who possibly is still stuck a good 5 years behind the timeline, who doesn't realise that sort of thing isn't going to fly anymore. You don't get special treatment because you've got to protect a characteristic.
The main thing about Peter Mandelson, you need to remember though, he like Prince Andrew, funny coincidence that, never met a dodgy billionaire he didn't like. Not one. Never met one he didn't like. So many question marks about that man. So many question marks about Keir Starmer's judgment in appointing him. He is utterly brilliant. He is genuinely incredibly clever. He's an amazing operator. He definitely knows where bodies are buried. There's no question at all about that. However, his judgment in his private life, both with his own finances, that Notting Hill house, all those years ago. I was the first person to write about that, by the way. And his his dealings with any businessman over the years, and his best friend, who apparently he was just on the periphery of the life of this man, who he called his best pal in a birthday message. Judgment absolutely appalling, but there we are. Love to hear your thoughts on that as well. Give us a call on all the topics we're talking about. 0344 499 1000. We'll get your calls up next. This is Talk.
Esteemed state broadcaster, the BBC, that we all have to pay £180, $220 or so a year by law to fund, was foisting upon us a practising paedophile.
A couple of days before, I was at the Trick Awards because James Well, the guy I used to work with, got a Lifetime Achievement Award, and he was sitting on a table with all BBC executives, and he went up to get a prize, and they all knew this was coming, and they didn't care.
The BBC always tries to cover everything up. That's what they try to keep this a secret, and shame on them.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 10:26 is the time. This is Talk the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Benedict Spence still with us as well. Lots and lots to talk about today. I'd love to hear your thoughts on, particularly after the 500 protesters were killed in that brutal crackdown by the Iranian government over the last couple of weeks, but particularly over the last few days since the deposed crown prince, the Shah's son, has been calling on social media for Iranian people to come out on the streets, and he's called for it again, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, keeping on going. Should Donald Trump, as he promised to do, take action to help them? And if so, what should he do? Should we get involved as well? Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Love to hear your thoughts on everything else as well, including that police chief at West Midlands who's still bizarrely got a job, and anything else you want to talk about, including, Mandelson. I didn't know about Jeffrey Epstein or the girls because I'm gay. But there we are. It's an interesting defence. I'm not sure it would stand up in a court of law, but he's been accused of any crimes. He's just been accused of very poor judgment, because if you are someone who gets appointed to be the ambassador from this country, I'd like to think you're someone who doesn't think it's OK to be busy mates with someone who rapes teenage girls. I know, I'm old-fashioned like that. Anyway, let's get to your calls, 0344 499 1000. Let's go to Barry. He's in Norwich and wants to have his say on Iran. Good morning to you, Barry. Happy Monday morning.
Oh, yes, another day in paradise. Good morning, Julie. Good morning, Benny.
Isn't it beautiful in Norwich right now? Have you got
it's gorgeous.
Have you got like the sun and the palm trees?
The palm trees are just flowing. The grass is green. The sun is out. The sky is blue, and
Yeah, get your cocktail out for later. Anyway, it was probably better than life in Iran right now.
Well, yeah, I'd like to make a comment on Iran and a quick comment on Israel. That's all right.
Yes.
Yeah. I personally don't think that we should get involved with Iran, and I'll tell you why. Because history. Whenever we've got involved with conflicts with America or anybody else, it's all ended up just a pile of rubbish. No one there. We haven't replaced it. We can't keep removing regimes and not replacing them with anybody, because then you get things like ISIS and all them sort of people emerge.
Yeah, it went wrong. Here's the thing. Syria, we didn't get involved in Syria, and ISIS largely was able to survive because of that. There's also a problem if we don't get involved.
Yeah, I know. I don't even think Donald Trump would allow us to get involved, because I don't think he trusts this country, to be honest with you, anyway. I just don't know, to be honest with you.
You're just thinking, look, we don't know what the outcome's going to be. No. Why don't we just not make this our problem?
Well, we've got lots of things to deal with in this country, haven't we? Do you know what I mean?
We do.
Without getting involved.
Apart from the fact those mullahs in Iran are busy funding terror threats here in the UK.
Yeah, but we're allowing them in on boats.
We could stop that if we wanted, couldn't we? I don't know why we don't want to. Yeah. What's your point about Israel, you were going to say?
Yeah, I don't know if you noticed this, but I haven't heard a lot of it on the news, but I just take you back to the New Year's Eve celebrations on the Thames, where they had all them flags on that boat.
Yep.
The Israeli flag was flying, but there was no Star of David in it.
Yep.
Did you hear about that?
Yes, I did. I looked at it that next morning, yep.
Oh, did you? I wasn't listening then, sorry.
No, I wasn't. I was away, but I'd had a look at it.
I'd never heard anything about from anywhere anyone mentioned it. I just found it quite intriguing. Why, Sadiq Khan talks about diversity and all this sort of stuff, but there was no there was no Star of David on the Israeli flag.
Yeah, I think he always accuses us of all getting our knickers in a twist, apparently, everything we complain about. I just would just like to have some fireworks that just don't have a political dimension of any sort. I just don't know why there can't just be some pretty fireworks. I'm old-fashioned again, what can I say? Barry, thank you for that. Let's go to Nigel, who's in London. Very good morning to you, Nigel. You want to talk about the Maccabi Tel Aviv match and the ongoing row over this.
Good morning. Yes, I hope you're well and your guests.
Thank you.
I was going to say simply, as I said to your co-worker who kindly took my telephone call, and I can demonstrate this, there has never been, and there still is not, any accountability by police officers to the general public, and that is shameful. This man should have gone.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
Well, it's supposed to be the police and crime commissioners who do this, but of course, this guy was appointed by this police and crime commissioner.
Absolutely. I'll give you an example about accountability. I'm very lucky. We live in the US as well, but let me give you an example about accountability in the US. Mm-hmm. If you've got an issue with a police officer in the US, the defence against the police can get the officer's HR record, number one, which you can't get in the United Kingdom. And number two, the police often will prosecute and or sack and dismiss police officers. How often does that happen?
Can I just say, I've read exactly the opposite, actually. One of the big issues is the police unions there have stopped an awful lot of that going on, where there have been, for instance, police shootings.
No, it's still. You raise an interesting point, and I'll tell you something interesting about this. In America, if a police officer uses force which results in a person dying, and that could be a firearm, a physical altercation, a motor vehicle, wherever it may be, the police officer is not granted anonymity because they don't have a secret police service. Why are police officers granted anonymity here, number one? And number two, why is it all we keep hearing from people like Mark Rowley, oh, well, yes, it's a discipline process to go for. We can't sack them because they've got to go through a discipline process. If you've got a bent cop, I don't care who they are, they're not good enough to serve you and I. They should be gone.
Well, yeah, and we certainly had that story last Thursday, didn't we, about an extraordinary number of officers, serial rapists, the like, because they didn't bother doing any vetting. I mean, even the most basic vetting you might do, just hiring someone to work in a sweet shop, but they weren't doing any of it. It's extraordinary. Nigel, thank you very much indeed for that. Benjamin Spence, quick reaction, the lack of accountability for the police in this country.
I mean, to be honest with you, I think it sort of mirrors a lot of the lack of accountability of all sorts of things. We see this with the NHS, don't we? And sort of every sort of scandal that comes up in this country, there is always seems to have been a process to cover up what has happened, and then we have the inquiry, and then everybody forgets about it. I don't think the police are any different. It is just institutionalised now.
I think you're fine, Benedict. You missed out the lessons being learned.
Oh, of course. Lessons are always learned, which is that we should have hidden it better first time round. That's always the lesson.
Literally the lesson, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right, now, we're going to go to a quick break in a moment. First up, time now to find out how you could be in chance with winning a trip of a lifetime to San Francisco. Talk is giving away flights, a 3-night stay at a 4-star Intercontinental Hotel, and $2,500 spending money, plus, small point this, tickets to the Super Bowl to top it all off. Listen to find out how you can enter.
For your chance to win, text TALK to 83338. Texts cost £2.50 plus your standard network rate. Or call 0343 418 7260. Lines close 22nd January 2026, 4 p.m. That's when you'll need to answer your phone if it rings. 18 plus, UK residents only. This is a network promotion. Full T's and C's at TalkSport.com. So for your chance to win, text TALK to 83338 now.
A very, very good luck. You do not want to miss out on this trip of a lifetime. Anyway, we're going to go straight to a break. Then we're going to be talking to our next guest, who is a British Iranian journalist, about what on earth is going on around and what can the outside world, if anything, do to help those protesters. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. Welcome back to the show. 10:35 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's go straight now to my next guest to talk about where we are with Iran. And, of course, all these big question marks about whether or not Donald Trump is going to come good on his promise to help the Iranian protesters if the mullahs started fighting back and shooting people. Well, there's no doubt at all. At least 500 believed to be dead. Even the Iranian regime on their own state television are happily showing pictures of makeshift morgues and body bags in their dozens. Let's talk about this with Potkin Azama. He's a British Iranian journalist and a senior fellow at the Investigative Project on Terrorism. Very good morning to you, Potkin.
Good morning, Julia. Thanks for giving me this opportunity.
Well, thank you for joining us. It'd be nice to have, good to have some expertise on what is really going on. Look, the reality is it's very difficult to get information out of Iran since they basically cut down, all phone contact, internet contact. I think 1% of access to the internet. We've got Elon Musk's Starlink that is being used, but a lot of the information is coming out, 12 hours, 24 hours later. But there's no doubt we are seeing footage now of these protests pretty much in every town and city, it would seem. An awful lot of people on the streets, but also an awful lot of people now getting hurt. What is going on?
Well, I've got a byline in the Times this morning, and it starts off with a message that I managed to get yesterday from a contact who was near the border and was managing to get some sort of signal. And I said to him, what's the most important thing we've got to do outside? And he said, restoring internet is more important to us than bread. And that's how the byline in the Times starts today as well. And you mentioned Starlink. Even Starlink, which was allowing some of the videos to come through when they shut down the internet, they've managed to even jam that. 80% of the Starlink connections is now jammed with the help of Chinese technology.
Of course, what a surprise. And why is it that the internet is so important? Is it that so that protesters can contact each other, so they can keep in touch? Because we've also had these messages from the Crown Prince, haven't we, or urging people, go out on the streets at this time, on this evening, and so to get people out. Why would that be so crucial?
Look, there's a huge massacre going on in Iran. You mentioned 500. I'd like to dispute that figure. The number of people killed is not in their hundreds anymore. It's in their thousands.
That's what everyone suspects.
I don't know exactly how many thousand, but it's in their thousand. And obviously, if there's no internet, they can just carry on with this massacre while the world moves away. I don't know where the activist elite class are. What is it that it's not important for them for when Iranians get massacred?
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? Lots of people, the celebrities, the lefty activists, the people out on the marching on the pro-Palestinian marches, Gaza, really, really care about human rights of people, particularly Muslims, and yet not really that bothered about the Iranians for some reason. Why do you think that is?
I don't know, because I agree with J.K. Rowling and when she said, look, if you care about human rights, you've got to come out in support of the protesters in Iran. If you're not coming out in support of the protesters in Iran, you're a fake, you're a phony. Yeah. And I think that's what the activist elite class in this country is. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, Greta Thunberg, as I suggested at the weekend, is probably trapped well, she's obviously trapped underneath something heavy. She can't reach her phone because she's not messaged about this at all. And especially when we're talking about a lot of these protesters, look, there's an economic aspect to this as well, isn't there? And there's an issue of young women in particular kind of leading a lot of the activism early on. Rabina Aminian, she was one of the faces now of this awful brutality as a young woman, just living a normal life on Instagram, studying fashion, and she gets shot close range in the back of the head because she wants basic freedoms like not have to cover her head and to live a normal life. But talk to us through about what the economic issue is there, because that maybe not the the ultimate driver of this, but it has been the catalyst for this action now, hasn't it?
Okay, so just bear with me. So there's something in Iran that was called preferential exchange rate. So what that means is that in this country, say, for example, if you want to change some euros, you can go to various places and they'll give you more or less the same rates with a little bit of difference. But in Iran, from many, many years ago, they started this thing called there was a free market rate for the foreign currency, and there was a preferential rate that was given to the cronies to bring in essential goods and everything. And then what started happening was that these people, they were spending, say, maybe 10%, 20% of that on bringing essential goods. The rest of it, they were selling on the free market, making, 10 times the money overnight. And that's been the cause of the malaise in the Iranian economy, because rather than doing some long-term investment, investing in a factory to produce something, you just basically go and get the preferential rate of foreign currency that you have and you sell it in the open market. And the regime's inability to go after their own cronies and stop their corruption has caused this, because
they're all at it.
When they run out of their preferential exchange rate, these people were the ones that started the protest, but the people that just acted as a catalyst, as a spark. The people didn't come out in sympathy with these bazaar traders or anything. Yeah. That was just a catalyst. That's
fascinating. And there's been, certainly in terms of
cronies, it's the corruption of their own cronies and their inability to stop it. that has brought about their own downfall.
And again, when you have a level of corruption like that and incompetence, people being hired and fired, hired, never fired, because of their sort of theological devotion and their cronyism rather than their ability, then the country starts failing. We've certainly seen the inflation rate going absolutely sky high, to the extent that shopkeepers, you can't buy a good to sell it because the cost of it the day after you buy it is so much more. It's kind of becomes meaningless, and basically the free market of any sort disappears. In terms of what can be done from outside, can the West help to restore the internet? How can they do that?
I don't know, but the people that are experts in this field, it's my job is to let them know that this is what the Iranian people are requesting more than anything else. But they are also requesting interventions, because they went out on Thursday and on Friday with the thinking that if they were told that if the regime starts shooting the protesters, something will be done. Yeah. And it sort of reminds me of the Kuwait war, Julia. I don't know if you remember that.
I do.
When Saddam was defeated in Kuwait and they had to retreat, the perception was that he's about to be overthrown and his regime is about to collapse. So George Bush gave the sort of signal for the Kurds and the Shias to come on the streets to overthrow Saddam, and they did. But then there was no backing, and they were under the impression that would be backed. And Saddam killed thousands, hundreds of thousands to put the rebellion down. Yeah. And this is like a similar repeat of that. I've never, ever backed military intervention in Iran, but something has got to be done, because the killing on this scale has to be stopped. It cannot go on.
There is an element where the more people see the killing, the more frightened people are going to be. Mums and dads are going to go say to their young people, do not go onto the streets, you're going to be murdered and nothing's going to change. Now, I'm in awe of these young people, particularly young, who are so brave to go out on the streets and taking their life in their hands. But many of them perhaps might not realise they're taking their life in their hands. Is it likely? If you put money on it, do you think things will change? Because these mullahs are ideologically, completely driven, and they haven't got many options other than moving into a small apartment in Moscow if Moscow will have them. They haven't really got many options if the regime does end. They are going to fight to the death to keep their regime going, aren't they?
I think they will. But let me tell you that this regime has fallen before it's officially overthrown. It's unable to think long term now. It's unable to make any strategic decisions. Everything is short term. Everything is delaying the overthrow, but it's not going to. They cannot fix the economy. This is a thing, Julia. This is what I said to Ian a few days ago, before the protests got really bad. That's they may be able to delay. They may be able to come up with some short-term economy packages and all that, but the economy is beyond repair. They cannot fix it. Something else that can be done, specifically with England outside Iran. You mentioned earlier when I was watching you about the regime outlets in this country. Why is England allowing a hostile state that's killing its own people to set up one outlet after another, one charity after another, and spread its network of influence with complete impunity? It doesn't make sense to me.
No, absolutely.
Those outlets should be closed right now.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more on that. Podkin Azima, thank you very much indeed. Really appreciate you joining us. Thank you for that. Benedict Spence, listening to that. Interesting, the idea that people are saying, look, restoring the internet, they need to have that communication. They need to have everything, the revolution will be televised, you know. It's important that people see. But again, you've also got the issue of, how can the West do that? If the Starlink is being disabled, how do they do that? Would a missile attack by Donald Trump in any way change things? And if he doesn't act after he said he would act, are we back to Obama and his red lines in the sand over chemical attacks in Syria?
Yeah, I think that's a difficult one for Trump to row back on. And in the past, actually,
don't make those threats unless you're going to carry them through.
But to be fair to Trump, he has always stuck to his words on this, be it Nicolas Maduro, be it Qasem Soleimani. Actually, when the red lines are crossed, Donald Trump acts. That's his whole shtick, which is that he doesn't actively seek the conflict, but when other people cross the lines that he sets out.
Don't do it. If you do, I'm going to act.
Yeah, and that plays well with his base, because then he can turn around and say, look, I'm not starting the wars, but I am trying to finish them, and that's what happens. But when it regards to what it actually could be, it could be a missile strike, it could be similar to the B-2 attacks.
What does the missile strike do?
Potentially it destroys an installation, it destroys, say, a military intelligence basis,
it's worth
that
killing
sort of thing.
Khomeini.
But what's more likely...
I'm all for
but
regime change and killing leaders like that. I've got no issue with that.
This is the key thing. And it's probably going to be the Maduro event that has probably sparked a lot of fear within the regime, which is going to be special forces operations. And
that'll be Mossad rather than the Americans.
It'll be us. It'll be us.
We're good at this stuff.
Yeah, actually we are. When when we talk about European forces assisting the United States anywhere, it's not France, it's not Germany, it's the Brits. It's just a very polite way of saying it's British Special Forces. It will be the US, it will be Mossad, it will be us as well. This is the sort of thing that, despite the hollowing out of our armed forces, we remain incredibly good at.
And it's incredibly important to remember, this isn't something, again, people talk about it, it's not something happening in a far-off land. This is where, this is the organisation, this is the government, this is the country that is funding terrorism, not just throughout the Middle East, throughout the world, including in Britain.
Yeah.
They want us... If they could get hold of a nuclear bomb, and thank you, Israel, for making sure that they don't, they would bomb us. They're insane, lunatic, religious nutters, and they want us dead. They want the West conquered, they want America dead, us dead. People need to get with the programme, and they are busily trying to undermine us from within. And by the way, our governments of many hues have happily allowed them to do that for the last few years.
Pound for pound, this is a more nefarious regime than North Korea, Russia or China in terms of its exporting of chaos overseas.
Thank you very much indeed. 10:47 is the time. Up next, going to talk about, well, we don't need any help really from the Islamist lunatics and terrorists to undermine our country. We've got our own police chiefs. The Chief Constable of West Midlands, Craig Guilford, for a start. How is he still in a job? We're going to be talking to former police officer, founder of Fair Cop, Harry Miller, up next about that. This is Talk.
These millions that she's milked the system of could have gone to the sort of causes that the government, not just this government, but the previous governments have embraced in terms of helping hard-working people to get struggle through with the cost of living.
I just wanted to ask you, you're talking about the abuses of the welfare state, and I would never let Starmer off the hook. But this isn't something that's just reared its ugly head in the last 18 months. People have been abusing the welfare system for years.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. 10:49 is the time. Well, let's get some common sense right now with Harry Miller. He's a former police officer and founder of Fair Cop. Very good morning to you, Harry.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you very much for joining us. Well, I'm hoping it's not a good week, at least, for Craig Guilford. He's the Chief Constable of West Midlands Police, who, blow me down, is still in a job, but in all likelihood, we hope, won't be in a job by the end of the week, because we expect the Home Affairs Select Committee, the MPs unanimously to say, cross-party, that he's got to go, to tell the Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood she's got to get rid of him, simply because he has lied and lied and lied again over the decision-making and what really happened behind the scenes of that ban on the Maccabi Tel Aviv fans coming from Israel to watch that Europa League match back in November against Aston Villa in Birmingham. What do you make of this ongoing round? Why do you think he is still in a job?
Well, I think there is due process, obviously, and he's hanging on by his fingernails for dear life. But unfortunately, well, fortunately for us, unfortunately for him, he's going. There is no possible way he can survive. He was put in place, at least in part, at the approval of a radical Muslim mullah from the Green Lane Mosque. Now, of course, they would say that this mullah is the acceptable face of Islam, a moderate. Well, I don't think it's very moderate when your sermon includes advice to your followers that you should only lightly beat your wife if she leaves the house without your permission.
Only lightly. By the way, can I just clarify there? It was the chief executive of the Green Lane Mosque, that's his Kamran Hussein, who was on the panel that interviewed and approved Guildford for the job. It was about 50 odd people or something. But there wouldn't have been 50 on the whole panel. They obviously was involved in the role. But they had a speaker at the same mosque who had said this, and various other very questionable speakers. So it wasn't the same person saying this. But
no, not the same person. But it's the same platform, isn't it? That guy didn't get up there and speak without permission of the leader of the mosque. There's no doubt about that.
They would have known his views beforehand.
Yeah, exactly. So what on earth is a police chief doing, being vetted by people like that? I have absolutely no idea at all.
The crucial thing also is why on earth the police chiefs sought the views of mosques but not the views of the local Jewish community over whether or not they should ban these Maccabi Tel Aviv fans. I mean, I'm just going through, and I did it a little bit earlier, just really quickly, the litany of lies that have been told. They claim there were safety concerns for Muslims. That's the public thing, and that's why they had to ban the Tel Aviv fans. Actually, the fears were for the local Jewish community because of the threats of violence from local Islamist extremists. They decided on a ban before they got the evidence, as opposed to the other way round. They said they'd had evidence from Amsterdam police that there'd been this problem of this match in Amsterdam, and it was all the fault of the Tel Aviv fans. That was a complete and utter lie, the opposite of everything that the Amsterdam police have told them, opposite of everything that was in the courts in Amsterdam, in the media, in the official inquiry. I mean, they literally made that stuff up. They also claimed that they'd contacted the Israeli police, who then didn't attend a meeting. Police say we didn't know anything about this meeting. They also covered up events on the night when the Europa League match actually went ahead. They said it was peaceful, and all their public statements said there was no problem. In fact, the police's own logs, it's emerged this weekend, said there were masked up, their term, not mine, groups of Asian youths, up to 100 at a time in groups, looking for a fight. And of course, the Maccabi team actually had to be taken by coach to the stadium 5 hours early for fear of trouble for them even getting to the stadium. And they said, no, it was all peaceful, it was all fine. It's very clear what happened here, isn't it? Activist, Islamist thugs made threats, and the police went, OK, we'll do what you want, and we'll make basically Birmingham a Jew-free area because you don't want them here. That's kind of what happened, isn't it?
That's exactly what happened. The police fabricated evidence in order to mollify the mullahs. That's what they did. It's entirely wrong. I tell you what, I would be very interested if McPherson were around today in order to do a report on systemic anti-Semitism within the police, because the evidence would be absolutely overwhelming. I think no further back than a couple of years ago, where the Chief Constable of Northumbria, I filmed her in a march with people who were shouting from the river to the sea, Palestine shall be free. We saw the absolutely obscene spectacle, I think, this weekend of a bunch of police officers who look like wooden tops outside a restaurant in Notting Hill, as some idiots declared that Notting Hill was a Zionist-free zone. Again, from the river to the sea.
It's an Israeli restaurant. It's serving Mediterranean food. It's run by a guy who owns a whole set of restaurants. Having been to Israel, by the way, food's absolutely magnificent. I'm going to make sure I book a table at that restaurant very, very, very soon. On principle, thank you to the protesters for making that restaurant known to me. And I suggest everyone, I've genuinely, I've got... By the way, I'm not being paid for this. I know everyone goes, oh, you're getting your 7,000 shekels. Never had a penny. Happy to have a penny, don't mind. But it's called the Miznon Restaurant, M-I-Z-N-O-N Restaurant in Notting Hill. On this issue out on Friday night. Again, police not acting with a protest outside. I suggest everyone, every right-thinking person who can, books a table at that restaurant. Let's make sure that restaurant is a huge success.
Yeah, and it's the job of the police to facilitate people going to restaurants or football matches or anywhere else. Yeah, absolutely. If they're going about their lawful business, then it's not the job's primary concern to make sure that everybody is safe. Because if you're only interested in keeping people safe, what you do is you have a curfew.
Yeah.
No, it is the job of the police to make sure that we can go about our
lawful business. And this
absolutely.
This is when it comes down to the two-tier policing, doesn't it? And we're told, oh no, it's a load of rubbish, not happening. And yet we see it literally before our eyes all the time. If it's, Tommy Robinson's lot or anything, then they're quite happy to sort of, send in the riot squad and get involved. They'll say, well, there is going to be trouble, so we're going to act first. They won't even wait for there to be any trouble. Any other group, they won't wait for there to be any trouble. They will go in, or the marches are banned. UKIP wanted to do a march through East London, a large Bangladeshi Muslim area. They always act in advance. If, however, it is a group from certain communities, as they're called, because we don't seem to have a white community or an atheist or a Christian community, but we do have Muslim community. They will just basically say, oh, okay, we'll just stand around and hope there's no trouble. But the reality is, the only reason there isn't trouble is because they basically, as you say, they mollify these people and they just say, we'll let you do whatever you want.
Well, I think the clearest example of this was, I think it was last year, where police, I think it was in Staffordshire, faced with a potential armed bunch of Muslim men. They stood there and pleaded with them to leave their weapons at the mosque.
Yeah.
I mean, you cannot get a greater example of mollifying these complete and utter nutters. This would not happen if this was a Tommy Robinson or a UKIP or a Reclaim, a Reform, a rally, what have you. You wouldn't be told, leave your weapons at Wetherspoons, collect them later, lads. You would be, they would steam in with their holsters and their riot shields and their tear gas and their water cannons, and they would absolutely show that they are in charge. They would not mollify, they would not mollycoddle, and they would not compromise. But they do this all the time with this particular community. And I'll tell you what, Julia, it's going to get worse, because Rachel Keaton, the Chief Constable of Suffolk this last week, has said, we are bringing religion to everyday policing. She has declared that religion is going to define policing.
That's terrifying. That's literally the opposite of what policing should be.
Absolutely. Now, I'm a Christian. I don't want Christianity centering within policing. Do you know what I want centering in policing? The law.
Yeah.
And nothing more, nothing less. I don't want to be treated with kid gloves because I'm a Christian. I don't want Christianity to be favoured, and I certainly don't want Islam to be favoured. I want the law to be centred. I want the law to be the centre of everyday policing.
But the whole point is we're all supposed to be treated the same. And I don't care whether you're I don't care whether you worship fairies at the bottom of the garden or any other god or whatever. I'm an atheist. I don't care. Or an atheist. The point is, you should be policed in exactly the same way. If you commit a crime or threaten a crime, I don't care what your religion is or none, you should be arrested for that. And if you don't commit a crime, you shouldn't be. And as you say, the police have a duty to allow people to go about their lawful business, whether it's to go to a restaurant, to go to a football match, or to, walk into the West End in London, or go to your place of worship and not be harassed by protesters. Harry Miller, really interesting to talk to you, as always, former police officer and founder of Fair Cop. Thank you very much, Dee, for that. Benedict Spence, a very quick response to that. We'll talk about it more.
But that's the key thing, is that every right-thinking person wants it to be centred based on fairness, ultimately, not on special different groups. But we've managed to get ourselves into a situation where we're doing that Olympic competition. Who is the most favoured? Who is the most oppressed? They are the ones that get special treatment, and that then is how you get idiots like David Lammy saying, well, we need to abolish jury trials for certain things so that we can fast-track them, because if you don't, women who are victims of assault or this, that and the other, they're not getting a fair deal.
Can't trust the people. But do you know what we do? We can't trust the judges and we can't trust the police, and that is genuinely, when white middle-class women like me say I can't trust the police, that is a very scary thing in this country. We're going to talk more about that. Love to hear your thoughts on everything. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. Welcome back to the show. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 11 o'clock. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. And whether you're listening on DAB Plus radio, on your smart speaker, whether you're watching on YouTube or your connected device, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Don't forget, you can go to my YouTube page, The Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. Hit subscribe. You never have to miss a thing. Coming up in this hour, we're going to be talking about the deadly protests in Iran. Will the US act, and will Britain help? And should we get involved? Nigel Farage says that Britain looks like a pygmy due to Keir Starmer's spineless approach to defence spending. I mean, he's got a press conference about to start in just a couple of moments. I'll let you know what he has to say there. Also, we're going to be talking about whether or not Keir Starmer could be sending British troops to Greenland to guard the Arctic on behalf of Donald Trump. Also, the staggering, not a surprise to me, but staggering £4.5 trillion cost over the next 25 years. Trillion, not billion, trillion of Ed Miliband's net zero drive. I kid you not. And by the way, that's not me saying it. It's not someone who's all funded by big oil, one of those anti-net zero campaigners. It is literally a body called Nesso. It's a formal government quango, and they've crunched the numbers. And what the government wants to do, what Ed Miliband wants to do, will cost a whopping £4.5 trillion over the next 25 years to hit those net zero 2050 targets. I've told you it was insane all along. It's even more insane now when you look at those numbers. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of that. Just to let you know, in the last 5 minutes or so, Ofcom has said they have launched an investigation into X, formerly known as Twitter, over the creation of sexualised imagery using Grok. It's going to investigate whether X has complied with its duties to protect people in the UK from content that is illegal in Britain. Now, very interesting debate on this, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this as well as on the issue of Iran. But let me read you the question I put out on social media. A lot of you getting in touch about the protesters being killed in that brutal crackdown by the Iranian government. Well, the bodies, organisations are now saying it's at least 500. We had a guest on earlier, and I think a lot of this is being backed up in terms of when you see the number of body bags in the few morgues and makeshift mortuaries we've been able to see the images from, that it's probably in the thousands, not in the hundreds, the protests who are being brutally killed by the mullah's regime. But Donald Trump said he would take action if they started to crack down on the protesters demanding their freedom. Should Donald Trump take action to help them? What should he do? And should Britain get involved? Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text cost £1, standard network rate message. Delighted to say, joining me today is Benedict Spence, Conservative commentator. We're not going to, please, don't do an AI image of Benedict Spence in a bikini. No, I genuinely, that's not like a game like, oh, please do. Please don't do that. No one wants to see that. Benedict Spence, I think what's happening in Iran is more important, but this is the breaking news, so I want to ask you about this. I don't trust Ofcom at all. Hi, Ofcom. They are basically populated by the same people, you know, as basically all of the Blairite quangos. They think that, for instance, like the climate change debate is settled, and so we should be penalised if we say that we don't think that, you know, climate change is a threat and needs to be dealt with and things like that. So I mean, they are completely and utterly, you know, basically they all read The Guardian in the morning. Who are we kidding, right? I'm in two minds on this one. I think an awful lot of the attempts by the government, using some of their quangos like the Ofcom, to shut down what's going on social media, they seem to be all aimed at X, and they only care about X because it's owned by Elon Musk, and they don't agree with Elon Musk, and he doesn't agree with them, and Elon Musk is constantly attacking this government. If Elon Musk was a massive Democrat, they'd be absolutely fine. Okay. This stuff with this AI imagery, where you can say, "Hey, Grok, you know, please put this person into a bikini." This is available on pretty much all AI on all social media. It's been very noticed on social media. Apparently, you know, it happened to Kate, the Princess of Wales. So that's awful. We spoke to a guest, Samantha Smith, last week, and it happened to me over the weekend. Look away now. look away now if you don't want to see. But here's an image I put out of me and the bloke from Stoke, pixelated his photo, and then they decided to, for some reason, they thought it was a good idea, someone trying to get my husband's face unpixelated. And then someone said, put me in a bikini. That's not what I look like, HJ. For some reason also, if I'm in a bikini, I have to have nail varnish on. They've also changed my face, which is, so obviously they were that horrified by my image, they had to change it. Basically,
there's a lot going on in this image,
It's not a picture of me, it's someone else's body and someone else's face, but they've kept my rubbish hair. Thanks, Grok. I was sort of, now, I'm not a little sort of, fainting wallflower. Look, I'm called a baby killer and or granny killer and the C word, the B word and every other word in between most days on Twitter. It's frankly water off duck's back if a bunch of sad loser men in their basements want to spend their time doing these things. But I do object to somebody putting a sexualized image of me, changing an image I put up in a sexualized image. That I consider that to be harassment. That is a deep fake AI image and it's harassment. I don't think it should happen. The fact that Grok does it to a lot of younger women, that bothers me more, and particularly the fact that Grok does it to girls. If there have been cases where they've allowed literally young pre-16, even younger girls being put in bikinis. Now, when they do it to men, they do it to mock them. Oh, here's a funny image of Keir Starmer. They do it to women to sexualise women, but they're doing it to girls as well. Should it be stopped?
Grok doesn't do it. People do it. This is
Grok does it.
No, well, Grok does not do it of its own volition. Does Grok wake up one morning and decide that it's going to do it? No. People behind it do it. And there are, if this breaks the law, there are laws against that sort of thing. This is quite clearly a teething problem. This is an issue that the developers clearly didn't foresee happening, perhaps because they are not that way inclined. They wouldn't have thought that this is what people would use it for, perhaps quite naively, but we've found that this is the problem.
No, not naively. When you see Elon Musk tweets, it's always about how amazing AI is, and there are always these horrific sexualized images of cartoon-shaped women.
Elon Musk does
in scantily clad clothing,
not have the hours in the day to be programming it himself. He has so many other things
but
it's
a bunch of young men who frankly probably can't get a girlfriend because they've got no social skills.
Who are we talking about? The developers, or are we talking about the people doing this?
Both sides. And they're just basically doing all of these images that whenever he talks, whenever he pushes a picture from AI, it's not these amazing AI images of space or AI images of maps. It's always a sexualized cartoon image of an unrealistic image of women, like these sort of Japanese style
Final Fantasy style sort of people with wings and all that sort of thing. Yeah, it is very creepy, but he is not the personality who is in charge of
But he's allowing people to do it.
He has allowed people up to do it, perhaps not consciously, but it has been allowed to do. No, I'm sorry. He does not have any idea how many companies in charge
can be stopped from doing this.
It can.
So can all the other
When the
AI.
issues arise, it can be done from this. But what
Should
I'm
they
going
be
to
penalised,
what I'm going to say right now is perhaps why he is pushing back on this is because it is being weaponized against his platform.
Yeah.
He sees this as a very personal attack on him, and it is a personal attack on him. And let us be very clear.
Because they wouldn't be doing it otherwise.
This could have been brought up, this could have been raised in a way that says, look, we've discovered something that happens, it's potentially illegal, it's not good, could you manage it? And instead, what we had was a deluge of people who, it must be said, there was a lot of self-promotion going on with this, who created the images themselves, posted them on the platform and said, oh no, isn't this terrible, something must be done. At which point the government that hates him went, yes, we're going to censor it. And I'm sorry,
it's because they want to censor X anyway.
And if nobody could have seen that happening, if nobody could have seen the massive overreaction compared to other incidences of sexual abuse or manipulation of women, if nobody could have seen that coming, I'm sorry, that's very foolish of them. Ultimately, it is not the AI that creates it themselves. It is the people. There are laws against that sort of thing. It's a teething problem. We can find solutions to this. The solution is not to threaten to shut it down.
No, this is the thing. It's just like you have to obey the law, and I do, but this is the thing. And I'm always in 2 minds because I know a lot of people I campaign with a lot of issues over free speech who are very free speech absolutists. Well, I'm not, but it is interesting. Whenever we have any control over social media in particular, access to the internet, it's always framed. There are two reasons. It's anti-terrorism, and it's also about protecting children. And again, we've got this talk about, Kemi Badenoch, the Tory leaders, called for this as well. Basically, banning social media for under 16s. Now, I'm in favour of that. I think that's a really good idea, and I'm absolutely with the view that no school should be allowing any child to get a mobile phone out of any kind, so not a smartphone, at any point from 8:30 in the morning till 4 o'clock in the afternoon. However, I do worry about how you do that without impeding adults' ability to get on. But I also don't think that the internet needs to be a Wild West. But I worry about who controls it. And after what happened during COVID, I have all these people over the weekend saying, "Oh, you're listed, Grok," and I asked Grok myself, "You're listed as one of the top 10 accounts, your Twitter account, for disinformation." No, that was because the government reported me. There's one fact I got something wrong about one Australian terror attack, which, by the way, government security minister said the same thing, blaming it on Islamist terrorism when it wasn't. But I don't trust the people who would be in charge of controlling it to not use it to control general free speech and conversation about things like trans, about things like climate change, about things like Israel, and about all the other big issues.
Yeah, this is always going to be the problem, and this is when we are talking about the censored internet versus the Wild West. You don't want a China situation, you don't want a situation like we used to have in the bad old days, where you had things like the dark web, and then you could do all sorts of things, and that's, of course, how a lot of terrorist organisations used to recruit back in the day when there was no oversight at all. Of course, there has to be something in the middle. Actually, in this country, historically, we're quite good at being able to meet things in the middle there. When it comes to subjects like, child access to the internet, I happen to agree with you on the subject of social media. But again, I look back and I say it's about personal responsibility, a large degree of this, because a lot of parents turn around and say the government should do something, to which I then turn around and go, well, I'm sorry, they don't just access the internet, through their minds. They have access to phones, they have access to computers. Who controls that? It's the parents. Why should it be that the government is constantly having to get involved? Why is it that there are that many parents who aren't able to supervise their children, or, let us be very clear here, actively give them the devices because it acts as a sort of a childminder, because they don't want to have to deal with this. So it's a bit of give and take on both sides. Yes, of course, there need to be laws over things like this. I do think children shouldn't be on Twitter, below the age of 16, or Instagram, or any of these sorts of things. But come on, meet them halfway here. As a parent, do the oversight. And when it comes to the whole thing about Grok, again, a solution that I saw was, if you're going to be able to use Grok, you have to be verified. That's not saying you have to be verified to be on Twitter, but if you want to use that particular thing, people need to know who you are so that there's some accountability. I think that's quite a good halfway house. It seems to me a lot more sensible than just going, we're going to ban it because people are upset about it in the short term.
Yeah, absolutely. Very interesting. Love to hear your thoughts on this as well. 0344 499 1000. Just to bring you some breaking news from that Nigel Farage press conference. We were told he's going to announce a very senior political and business figure joining Reform UK. And that figure is Nadeem Zahawi. He has defected to Reform. Not an MP anymore, of course. Former Chancellor under Boris Johnson. Am I right in thinking he was a party chairman at one point? Yeah, he was Conservative Party chairman. But very briefly, Chancellor. It's one of those ones where, basically, we're going to run out of people. I'd have ended up at Chancellor, and you'd have ended up as Chancellor at some point. But he was Conservative Party chairman as well. But Nadeem Zahawi has defected to Reform. Benedict, now, we're seeing a lot of former Tories defect to Reform. Yeah. And there is this element where, that's where the future is. These people don't think that the future is with the current Conservative Party, perhaps under the current leadership, Kemi Baden, although everyone's saying, she's been making some good, interventions, doing well at PMQs lately, doing well. I'm definitely clearly sort of more on the ball and understanding you need to be out and about and everywhere. By the way, Kemi, we're still waiting for our interview, Kemi Baden. You've been promising me an interview for about 3 months now. I'm still waiting for it. Do come on and get, but I'd like to have a long chat with her. There's also a problem, which is a lot of people went to Reform after 14 years of Tory rule, being utterly useless, saying they'd do one thing and then doing the other, when it was immigration, taxes, you name it, climate change, all that madness. And, Nadeem Zahawi is part of all of that, a very senior figure a lot of that time. He had to resign, by the way, under very... I like the guy. I'm friendly with him, but it was absolutely untenable for him to remain in his job when he hadn't been paying all the taxes he was due to pay. Yeah. But does it help or hinder Reform to have a lot of people might say, washed up old Tories joining Reform?
Yeah, it hinders. And let's be clear, there's no guarantee that he's going to be a candidate in the next general election. Former MP can come out and say, I'm joining Reform, and it's entirely within the party's gift to go, well, that's nice, thank you for your membership fee, but we're not going to have anything to do with you. But there is that perception, isn't there, that lots of rats who have left the sinking ship are now trying to get on board this one. I'm sorry, I know lots of people whenever I come on your show and I criticise Reform, they get very upset, but I do worry that Reform is going to make the same mistakes that the Conservatives had. I have heard some of the people that are being considered to be candidates for reform, and some of them are very interesting,
Yeah.
and some of them are not. And some of them are the same sorts of people that the Conservatives tried to shoehorn in for years and years and years. The same kind of journalists who went to the same sorts of universities, the same sorts of lawyers, and they all know the same sorts of people. And, of course, the same sort of people who used to be Conservatives. I'm sorry, it doesn't give you any legitimacy because people have plummy accents and they've worked for certain newspapers. And you think, oh, that's going to make a good MP. No, that's how we got ourselves into this situation in the first place. Zia Youssef is doing a lot of work to try to get people who've worked in logistics, who have run organisations. He is working very hard. But I'm sorry, old habits die hard, even in insurgent parties in Westminster.
Absolutely.
They are going to make a rod for their own back.
It would be useful if they do win the next election to have people who understand how government works, to know how to deal with getting stuff done. But again, they were in government, you had to deal with getting stuff done, and still didn't get anything done that they said they'd do.
Reform is going to run into a
tsunami
of opposition.
Well, apparently a load of the civil servants say they're going to resign. Bye. Could you shut the door on the way out? Bye. Feel free to steal as many post-it notes as you want. Your services are not required.
They're not going to resign, though. They're going to actively try to sabotage everything.
And they're going to be so proud about it at North London dinner parties as well.
A lot of the legal elites in this country will. The media elites in this country as well. They're not going to give up everything that they've earned without a fight. And do you know who else is going to make our lives hard as well? The European Union, that same one that Starmer is currently trying to tie us ever closer to. If he succeeds, do you think they're just going to be happily sitting there going, oh, Nigel Farage is here, I'm sure we can do business with him? No. All of it is going to be arrayed against him. Farage needs a party of battlers, of grafters, of people who have experience in these things, not people who sound good at reform dinner parties as opposed to Tory dinner parties.
I mean, I tell you what, though, I mean, they're going to need people who absolutely don't care about, being absolutely slagged off in the media. Hi. I've offered my services before on a non-party political basis. I just support both. No. I want to be putting people on the plane. No,
you want to be in ice. That's what you want.
I totally want to be in ice. I totally want to be in ice.
You want the outfit. You want the flak jacket and all that.
Come on.
And the aviators.
Okay, Grok, put me in an ice uniform. Come on, do that. Right, lots more to talk about. Wow, lots going on. I'd love to hear your reaction to that. By the way, we're going to be talking to Leila Cunningham at midday. She is the new Reform announced candidate for the Labour. It's been Labour for so long. The London Mayor job. That's not coming up again until next year. Not this year, the mayor elections this year. We've not got mayor elections in London, but we're going to be talking to her about this and this defection. Lots more coming up as well. Let's talk about Iran. These Iranian protests, at least 500 dead. It's probably in the thousands by now. Trump said he was going to take action if they started shooting people on the streets. He said they're looking at things. The Iranians have hit back and saying we'll take action. We'll consider. We'll take action against you. I mean, you and whose army, frankly. But should Donald Trump act? Because again, you're back into Obama territory. Red line in the sand. If you use chemical weapons, Assad in Syria, then the America will act. They didn't do anything about it. If you say you're going to do it, you have to do it. What should he do?
I mean, let's be clear. When the Iranians say they'll hit back, they're not talking about conventional military capabilities. They're talking about terrorist sleeper cells, and they do have.
But they're going to do that anyway.
They will continue to do that everywhere. But if they try to sort of set them all off at once, then obviously they'll be trying to cause maximum problems. What the Americans are almost certainly doing is waiting for contacts in the region, Israeli intelligence as much as anything else, but also Azeri as well, to tell them, look, it's a good moment to push. Don't push before then, because if you do, then they'll be ready and they'll be meeting resistance, and it'll be the ordinary people who suffer. But if the regime gets to a point where a calculated intervention does help to get rid of the top of the regime, well, then you can create a situation where there is regime change without the country collapsing. Because this is the key thing. When we're talking about non-intervention versus intervention, Iraq was intervention and it was a catastrophe. Libya was a non-intervention, realistically, and it was a catastrophe. What they've done in Venezuela, for instance, they've taken out the man at the very top, but they haven't dismantled the organisation and they've not left him there. So they're trying there to set a precedent where you can cause regime change without the system completely collapsing. Obviously, Iran is currently in civil unrest, so it's different to Venezuela. But they are, I'm almost certain, trying to manage this situation because the last thing they want is a country that is, let's be clear, markedly, many times bigger and more powerful than Syria or Libya or Iraq going the same way.
Right. Well, I mean, we shall see. The question is, a lot of people saying, should Britain get involved? At the end of the day, we kind of end up we're little Satan, aren't we?
Yeah, we don't have a choice.
Iran, they alternate between whether it is Israel or Britain who are little Satan. I'm glad to be on that list.
The Russians do that as well. The Russians think we're much bigger and more sort of powerful than we actually are, and they're constantly blaming us for things. We're sat there going, oh,
if
really?
only we could do that. Well,
Yes,
it's interesting.
nice.
Nigel Farage again in an article yesterday talking about how we are now, pygmies on the world stage because of the hollowing out of our defence spending. Here's the thing, though. Well, and he's saying you get 3% by 2030 or whatever as of GDP. Well, yeah, I mean, I'm all in favour of that. But again, you're going to have to tell people where that money's coming from.
Our special forces.
Scrapping net zero is a good idea.
If something does happen in Iran, our special forces will be deeply involved because for all else, many other aspects of our conventional weapons have been hollowed out. They remain on par with the US and on par with Israel.
Right. Thank you very much. More from Benedict. Lots more coming up on all of the big topics of the day. Love to hear your thoughts on Nadeem Zahawi defecting to reform. Your thoughts on Iran. Should we get involved? Should America take any action? Your thoughts on the Maccabi Tel Aviv ongoing battle with that chief constable. I don't know how the earth that man is still in a job. The West Midlands chief constable. It's Craig Guilford. We talked about that a bit earlier. We'll carry on more talking about all of that. Lots more to come. Your call's up next. 0344 499 1000. Give us a call. This is Talk.
These millions that she's milked the system of could have gone to the sort of causes that the government, not just this government, but the previous governments have embraced in terms of helping hard-working people to get struggle through with the cost of living.
I just wanted to ask you, you're talking about the abuses of the welfare state, and I would never let Starmer off the hook. But this isn't something that's just reared its ugly head in the last 18 months. People have been abusing the welfare system for years.
Ours is still up as we speak.
Yeah, so are ours.
Right. And
you've got 3, haven't you? Yeah.
3, yeah.
Two artificial,
Mrs.
one
Carr
real.
will take them down.
No,
one for each family.
No, but wasn't there that bloke?
For each wedding.
There's that bloke who gives a hand, wasn't there?
Sean.
Only a hand.
The manservant.
He came up to me at Christmas and he went, I can't believe I've just had a message from my friend going, Jez has been on that grumpy old man saying you've only got 4 fingers and your nickname's Kit Kat.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Benedict Spence still here. That breaking news in the last 20 minutes or so. Nadeem Zahawi, former Chancellor, very briefly, under the premiership of Boris Johnson, but also long-time party chairman. And, I mean, business everything good. I mean, he had a huge number of jobs, Nadeem Zahawi, senior figure in the last big number of Conservative governments. He has defected to reform. Now, of course, he's not an MP, but he's been a big figure of the Tories. He said, I've made up my mind. Farage can deliver for Britain. A wonderful country is sick, he has told a press conference in London this morning. Wonder what you make of that. 0344 499 1000. Tony knows what she thinks. She's in Lincolnshire. She wants to have her say. Good morning to you, Tony.
Good morning.
What do you make of Zahawi defecting?
I am so upset that I voted for reform and now they're letting the rats who are leaving a sinking ship onto the boat.
Yeah. You don't want any ex-Tories?
No. I didn't vote for them. They was absolutely ridiculous what they've done for 14 years. This Labour government is just atrocious. I voted for reform.
Yeah.
not for ex-Tories.
And this is the thing. There's, this reform has grown up as a reaction to the failures of the Tories to do any of the things they said they would do. So almost by definition, someone who is a senior figure in a number of Conservative governments, I mean, so people would say, well, not quite sure why you're going to be someone who's going to get stuff done when you didn't get stuff done in the past.
I know, it's like having a puppet and then somebody else is cutting the strings, and it's awful. It's awful.
Would this actually stop you voting reform?
No.
But could it persuade other people? I suppose that's the balance Nigel Farage's got. He's had those battles with the Ben Habibs and the Rupert Lows and everyone as well, where people will say like, oh, he needs to be sort of courting people on, should we say, people to the right. I don't believe they're far right at all, to the right. But there's an element where when push comes to shove, on election day, people who are unhappy with the Tories and Labour and Lib Dems are going to go, I'll vote for the Reform Party because they've got the best chance of getting in. And what he needs to do is then court people from, well, I wouldn't say the left, the middle ground. I personally think Reform is middle ground in terms of their policies, if you look at like what normal people think about things. But he's got to grab people from the centre ground of British politics. I'm thinking Nadhim Zahawi is pretty centre ground. Would that make other people vote? In which case, are you, as a Reform supporter, more likely to get the government you want if people like Zahawi's involved?
Well, yeah, but I haven't voted for. He was Conservative. I didn't vote for Conservative.
Yeah.
And they are like rats running from a sinking ship.
Yeah.
And I love Nigel. I think he's brilliant. I love his policies. And I love... sorry. I'm just getting a bit emotional.
No, this means a lot to you. I understand. I think it does to a lot of people. Lots of people are like, this is our last hope. This is it. This is the only chance we've got of getting our country back. And that's what a lot of people think. And you're thinking it's all going to be sort of diluted by basically being Tory light. Yeah, well, it's a mixture of Tory and Labour. It's absolutely atrocious. And I've got grandchildren, and I just worry about the future of them. Oh, I do. I'm with you as well. I understand, Tony. I think a lot of people might feel the same way. Tony in Lincolnshire, thank you for that. I'd love to hear your thoughts, whether you think it's a good thing or a bad thing. No, I have to say, I thought the Nadine Dorries, again, I like her. She's great company at a party. Do I think the Nadine Dorries is an asset to reform? No, I don't think she is. I really don't.
I mean, I think not a lot of people actually know him or what he actually does, but Danny Kruger's defection, I think, was actually pretty seismic because he is a more cerebral Conservative and he will be involved in exactly planning. But it is that sort of fear. But also, he is someone who spoke out a lot. He was he wasn't in government. He was someone who was literally going, you need to be doing X, Y, and Z. You need to be going back to proper values. And he was talking about it. And this is the balance you have to strike. You do need to get former Conservatives, conservative thinkers, who are able to do that sort of thing, because the party did have a monopoly on them for a very long time. There is going to be that crossover, but you cannot allow it to be that with that come, frankly, the self-promoters, the careerists, the ones who just don't want to let go of the fact that they're not MPs anymore and that their time is done. OK, thank you for that. Love to hear your thoughts on that. Lots of calls coming in on Iran as well. Robert is in Hertfordshire and wants to have his say. Robert, do you think that Donald Trump should do anything to help the protesters in Iran? And if so, what?
Well, to be honest with you, whatever I'm for what Donald Trump's doing, but for whatever he's doing, we're going to pay for it over here. Because we've got sleeper cells coming over here daily, and this is what I'm worried about, And I think he owes us a little bit of responsibility, whether he can lend us some... he needs to help us, In what way? Well, maybe not physically, but, he needs to be a bit more involved, because we will be paying... I hope I'm wrong, but we will be paying for what he's doing now. So basically, if the America bombs Iran or does what they do to help the protesters, Iran will retaliate against America, but also against Britain. Well, that's the reason. You've got them coming over here daily in boats. Yeah. I won't. I mean, we could. Why do we need Trump's help to stop the sodding boats? I tell you what, if I genuinely, you make me Prime Minister, I'll stop the boats the next day. Don't have any. I could do that tomorrow. Well, we ain't going to stop the boats. We've got two problems here. We've got the problems with the boats coming in daily, and we've also got the problem with the migrants that are already in.
Yep.
And that problem is growing daily.
Yep.
We are in trouble.
Yep.
And now what's happening is you've got ghettos cropping up like in Birmingham.
Mm-hmm.
And this is all because of one word, tolerance. Tolerance has got us into this.
Yep. Tolerating intolerance has made us a less tolerant country. Who knew? Robert, I really appreciate your call. Thank you very much indeed. Lots of texts and tweets as well. I'm saying, what should Donald Trump do? John says yes. Message say end the regime. Trump says Rachel has more important things to do, such as liberating the UK. And Mike says what we really need is one of those stern joint messages from all the Labour mayors. Suspect we will have to wait for that. I'm not sure why we care that much, says Isla. And Gareth says we've got our own problems here in the UK. Digital ID, net zero, high taxes, anti-free speech laws. Let's focus on our own issues first before we try to liberate another country. And Yasmin says, I can imagine the Iranian regime is either hiding in its bunker or planning a last-minute holiday to Moscow. Lovely this time of year, I'm sure. 11:32 is the time. We're going to take a quick break and then we're going to be talking to Sir Malcolm Rifkin, the former Foreign and Defence Secretary. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. 11:33 is the time. Delighted to welcome to the show right now Sir Malcolm Rifkin, a former Foreign and Defence Secretary under the Conservatives. A very good morning to you, Sir Malcolm.
Thank you very much.
And lots to talk about. First up, let's talk about what's going on in Iran. We had protests. I believe, at the minimum 500 protesters killed. Many are saying it may well be in the thousands. People saying they need help to get the internet back working so they can communicate. Donald Trump had promised that he was going to help the protesters if the Iranian regime in Tehran started shooting them. Well, they've been doing that en masse. Should Donald Trump act? What should he do? And should we get involved?
Well, I think it's very likely that he will respond. And the only way he can respond is by air attacks on various parts of Iran. He's not going to send in combat troops. He's not going to use his naval power. It's essentially going to be to bomb some either military bases or other strategic buildings. Will that have much impact? Not in the short term, it won't, because the regime is desperate to retain its existence as a regime. They have to crush these protests, and they will swallow hard if the Americans attack them. But what we are seeing is this is the last phase of the Islamic Revolution. They can stop this particular uprising, but they've not got anything left unless they totally reform their own internal structures.
But as we've often seen with these regimes, if they sort of give an inch, then the whole edifice collapses. Are you convinced we are in the end game of this? And how much of that is down to, for instance, Israeli and US airstrikes in the last year?
Well, no, if it was up to the Iranian people, yes, this is the death throes of the Islamic Republic, so-called. But these things can sometimes be delayed several years if the regime in question is sufficiently ruthless. Now, when it comes to the United States have already shown that they have power in relation to Iran that no one else has. When they, for example, sent a chunk of their air force right across the Atlantic to bomb the nuclear program of Iran. And they did that superbly well. Somebody has once remarked that America is not just a superpower, it's a super duper power. And it's the only one that there actually is. I mean, Russia, China, no other country could remotely compare with their military capabilities, so they can do a hell of a lot. Will they try and take out the supreme leader? I mean, having grabbed Maduro, I should imagine Khamenei, the supreme leader, is very, very nervous, and he will not be in the same building every evening.
Yep.
He'll probably be in a taxi at the moment, going between various so-called safe houses.
Yeah. And indeed, I was wondering how much what had happened in Venezuela. I mean, again, we're only on the 12th day of January, and there's already been quite a lot happening in international affairs, but how much of impact that would have. And it is interesting also, we know extraordinary intelligence that the Israelis have, and Mossad has, having what they've done in Iran, the extraordinary attacks that they took out in Iran in terms of completely undermining their ability to wage war against Israel. Should we be concerned about threats from Khamenei's regime to the Americans in retaliation for any action, or as one of my callers just asked about, what about retaliation against us, whether it's sleeper terror cells or whatever? Should we be concerned about that?
Well, obviously concerned, yes, but there's not a huge amount the Iranians can do militarily. The United States is dramatically more powerful than they are, as are the Israelis, and these are the two potential targets. But in addition to that, what we're really talking about is how Iran is going to survive if it manages successfully to suppress these protests. And I think by sheer brute force, that is, I hate to say it, but I think that's more likely than not over the next week or so. Then the Iranian regime has to decide, is it capable of reforming itself to meet the desperate problems of the people? And there's a link between this and their foreign policy. One of the things that has really made the Iranian public completely fed up with the regime is that the state of their economy is partly because huge resources have been spent by the Iranian regime over years to attack Israel, or to spread Iran's foreign policy control in Syria or Lebanon or with Hezbollah or whatever. That all costs huge sums of money that could have been spent on the economy. So the Iranian public is saying, what on earth are we doing this for? Why should Israel be our enemy? And it's worth remembering when the Shah was in power, Iran actually supplied Israel with its petroleum requirements at that time. They had a perfectly good relationship because they had no obvious reason not to have.
Yeah, and it is really interesting, isn't it, how much the economy has been a catalyst with this spiralling inflation and just basically inability for the country to function at any level right now.
Well, can I just come in on that? It's also, of course, the effect of existing mainly US sanctions, because the main wealth that Iran has is its oil and gas. But they've only been able to actually export a fraction of what they would otherwise have available. And even what they've exported has been discounted because the people buying saying, we know you're finding it difficult to find buyers, we'll buy it, but only if you reduce the price further. So the sanctions that the Americans can enforce have had a huge impact, continuing impact, not just on the regime, but on the economy as a whole. And so all these issues are tied together. And it's interesting, there are reports today saying the Iranian regime are asking for immediate talks with the White House. Now, got to be careful about that. That could be just to buy time.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean they're willing to genuinely negotiate. Or it may mean they want to know what the American price would be. As we saw in Venezuela, Trump can sometimes surprise us. The regime continues without Maduro because they have been prepared to make major compromises to the US government in terms of requirements. So
but it is also interesting that the Crown Prince, who's been sort of calling on people on social media, the son of the Shah, exiled in 1979, has been calling on people who are parts of the regime, parts of even the IRGC, the Iranian, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. So if you want to defect, here it's bizarre how you're talking about sort of absolute mad mullahs, but also you've got a code. Look at the QR code and register to say you want to defect. The meeting of modern technology and these age-old issues. What do you make of the IRGC though, and them being sent onto the streets of Tehran?
Well, that's what they're there for.
But
they're there.
Yeah, but crucially also, what about the demands back here in the UK that we should prescribe this organisation? Would that change anything whatsoever?
Nothing remotely would it change, because remember, the IRGC isn't a separate organisation. It's part of the Iranian regime. The organizations you sometimes declare to be a terrorist organization are organizations that are the terrorist groups or people behaving in a terrorist way. When you're dealing with a government whom you already deal with as if they're terrorists, because that's what they are, the IRGC is just part of that. Just one remark, if I may, about Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi. He's a brave man and he is offering leadership at the moment, but I wouldn't overestimate what he can do.
No.
One of the great problems of the Iranian opposition is the regime have been successful in preventing any alternative anti-regime organization developing within Iran.
Yep.
There's no obvious leadership. There are no people we can point to and say there is a potential new leader. And so Reza Pahlavi, the son of the Shah, in a sense is filling that gap. But I think he knows as well as anyone, the vast majority of Iranians weren't even born when the Shah abdicated almost 40 years ago.
Yeah.
And therefore, he's not going to be a major factor unless something very strange happens.
He was just talking about him being an interim figure. Let's talk about other issues. Talk of Britain being among the government, the government sending troops to Greenland to basically help protect parts of the Arctic that are under threat. Trump claims from China and from Russia. Is that likely to happen, and is that a good use of our resources?
Well, let's take them one by one. Is it likely that Britain is going to be sending troops to Greenland? No, it is not, and nor is France or Germany or any other country. That would be absurd. What are they going to be there to do? To fight the United States if the United States send the Marines in? We all know the issue is not a military one in relation to Greenland. Greenland has no army. The United States could occupy Greenland in 24 hours, probably without a shot being fired. That is not the issue.
Yeah.
The issue is whether the so-called leader of the free world that has totally campaigned against Putin's Russia on the grounds that you cannot annex other countries' territory just because you feel like it. It's going to break its own rules. It's going to act in a way that no American government has thought of doing. And the reason is primarily, I hate to say this, it's got nothing to do ultimately with resources or political strategy. It is Trump's ego. The history of the United States in the 19th century were its various presidents expanding the territory of the United States. So they got Florida from Spain, they got Louisiana from the French, and eventually they got the Russians to sell them Alaska. Trump wants to be the president who expanded the territory of the United States in this century, in his presidency, and I'm afraid it's as pathetic as that.
Well, I mean, you say that, but I mean, everyone says it's not for sale. But he did manage to purchase all those large tracts of land. Just finally, can we talk about the fate of the Conservative Party? You were a former senior cabinet minister of the Conservative Party. There's another former senior cabinet minister, Nadeem Zahawi. He was chancellor. He was a cabinet office minister. He was also, of course, party chairman for a period of time. Nadeem Zahawi has defected to Reform. He said he's made his mind up. He says Farage can deliver for Britain. Our wonderful country is sick, he says. He's doing a press conference right now with Nigel Farage in central London. What do you make of the stream now of prominent Conservatives, including those who were cabinet ministers in the last few years under the Tories, joining Reform?
Well, allow me, without being unfair, to comment. Yes, Nadeem Zahawi was Chancellor. I think he was Chancellor for 8 weeks.
Is it that long?
Yes, well, it felt longer, you're right. So it's really, he's in Liz Truss type territory in terms of that. But he is a senior figure. Having made my little dig at him, he is a senior figure. One has to ask why he's doing it. And frankly, it's opportunism, as it is for so many others. They know that barring miracles, they're not going to be in government under a Conservative Prime Minister for the next few years. And Reform suddenly opens a theoretical possibility that all the world could be changed by Nigel Farage. Now, you've got to look at what Farage stands for. He's got one issue which carries a lot of weight with the public, and that's immigration. If that issue is resolved, and it's a big if,
it's not going to be.
If it's resolved satisfactorily over the next 2 or 3 years by the current government, whoever is Prime Minister, what else does Farage actually have to offer? He tried to pretend he had a policy of reducing taxes, and he had to he literally abandoned his economic policy a couple of months after he first announced it. So the Conservative Party actually should be grateful to Rachel Reeves. What she achieved in her last budget, no, seriously, what she achieved in her last budget, up till then, people could either believe or be told that we still had new Labour created by Tony Blair that keeps your taxes down and all that kind of thing. That budget demonstrated that Labour had reverted to pre-Blair, which is high tax in order to fund high welfare. And the Conservative Party is the only credible party, as it always has been, for those who wish to reduce the tax.
No chance of you defecting then?
In which direction did you have in mind?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, a lot of people might be saying, yeah, you could probably be perfectly happy in the Lib Dems.
Well, no, who could be happy in the Lib Dems? Crying out loud.
They don't look that happy,
this is, if I may say so, this is humour of a very poor taste.
So
somebody once remarked, they're a very centrist party, the Lib Dems. Somebody once remarked that if Christopher Columbus had been a liberal Democrat, he would probably have discovered the mid-Atlantic.
So Malcolm Rifkin, absolute pleasure. Thank you very much. I think we can safely say we are not going to be getting a press conference in the coming months where Sir Malcolm Rifkin, former Defence and Foreign Secretary, defects to reform. Just your response to that particular issue, Benedict Spence.
Well, Columbus discovering the Mid-Atlantic.
No, because I bet you could actually talk for 10 minutes about that.
Sadly, yes. Zahawi's defection,
but the opportunism, he's saying.
Of course. I think that's accurate, and I think that's what a lot of this is. I think that, whereas...
Isn't all politics opportunism?
Of course, a lot of it is. But I think that the sad thing is that there were once, I think, you'd look at the Conservative Party and even the Labour Party, and you'd look at them and say that there were politicians there of substance and principle. And the problem is now, when you're looking for defectors, that sort of thing is really thin on the ground. And, I mentioned Danny Kruger earlier. He's a sort of a lone figure in that actually a lot of people, even though he was not particularly high profile, a lot of people who knew him said, well, there's somebody who thinks he's a good constituency MP and he thinks about issues of a broader magnitude. But if we're being honest, a lot of the other ones are simply there because I think, and I suspect some of them Rifkin agrees with me, they quite like being on the airwaves, front page. They like people listening to what they have to say. I tell you what, it's interesting to because he is a self-made multi-millionaire. There's an element where some of them... That got him into a lot of trouble at one point.
Somebody, I think he's an HMRC, a facts investigation that he did not declare. He was breached 7 breaches of the Cabinet Minister rules, basically, and was sacked by, I lose track, Rishi Sunak, probably.
Somebody,
one of the many prime ministers we had in that period. But genuinely, it's... he unlike a lot of them who literally desperately just wanted to have a job. He doesn't need to. So but anyway, a lot of them like the power. They, as you say, they like the glory.
What I would say, he's a very good media communicator.
He's a fantastic media communicator.
He would be useful to them in that capacity.
Absolutely. 11:47 is the time. We're going to take a quick break. We're talking there with Malcolm Rifkin about those reform policies, what they got apart from immigration. Well, by the way, Keir Starmer ain't going to be solving either legal or illegal immigration issues at all in the next few years. But definitely also not going to be solving another key plank of the reform policy, long-standing, which is abolishing net zero, which we should absolutely do, given that the cost of net zero, according to the government's own quango that looked into this, is going to be, wait for it, do you know what? I'm going to wait until after the break to tell you, because the number is so sky high, you're not going to believe it. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Our esteemed state broadcaster, the BBC, that we all have to pay £180, $220 or so a year by law to fund, was foisting upon us a practising paedophile.
A couple of days before, I was at the Trick Awards because James Well, the guy I used to work with, got a Lifetime Achievement Award, and he was sitting on a table with all BBC executives, and he went up to get a prize, and they all knew this was coming, and they didn't care.
The BBC always tries to cover everything up. That's what they try to keep this a secret, and shame on them.
On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is indeed Talk the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Now, let's talk about net zero, because the most astonishing figures have emerged, apparently published by a government quango, NESO, in the last month, suggesting what the real true cost of net zero policies by 2050 will be. And that figure is so unbelievably staggering. I suggest you, if you are driving a vehicle right now, pull over. If you're holding a hot drink, put it down and just listen. 4.5, wait for it, trillion pounds over the next 25 years to hit those net zero 2050 targets. 4.5 trillion pounds. Well, let's talk about this with Ross Clark, author of Not Zero: How an Irrational Target Will Impoverish You, Help China and Won't Even Save the Planet. Never was a book better titled. Ross, good morning to you.
Good morning, Julia.
I have to say, I don't think you were surprised by that number. It is an absolutely astonishing number, but it's not been sort of put out by, you know, people who are climate change deniers or people who are backed by an oil company. These numbers have been produced by NESO, this body which is a government quango, isn't it?
Yeah, this is the National Energy Systems Operator, which is the government quango charged with running the national grid. And the figure they've put out, £4.5 trillion, which, by the way, is approaching the size of the UK economy. It's what the entire output of the UK economy for 1 year. That's just the figure for the sorting out the electricity grid. It doesn't include things like decarbonising steel, decarbonising cement, decarbonising agriculture. You know, three very big industries which are responsible for quite a lot of carbon emissions. So, I mean, all those costs would come on top. And to put this in historical context, when the then Parliament voted to, well, no, it didn't vote, it was just nodded through by the Theresa May government, the net zero target in 2019, that was on the back of an estimate that was put out by the Climate Change Committee, which claimed that it would just cost us £1 trillion.
Just the 1 trillion. What's a trillion quid between friends, Ross?
This is going worse than HS2, isn't it? The costs are galloping up, but nobody knows what the costs are of decarbonising the economy, because it relies on the invention and commercialisation of technologies which don't yet exist.
Yeah, this is a small point. Well, I keep being told by all these green people, oh no, we can do all this, and there's batteries, and it's this and it's that. It's like, it doesn't exist, mate. But this thing, so it's wind farms, building all these wind farms, and of course, and the solar panels, but also crucially that infrastructure, the big pylons and everything, to actually link them to the energy grid. These green heating systems, which aren't green, these heat pumps, which of course cost 3 or 4 times more and don't actually heat your home. I mean, I've said it a million times, I'll say it again, over my dead body is anyone coming in my home and forcing me to have one of those heat pumps. Upgrades to roads and railways, because we've got these heavier cars, electric vehicles, having the infrastructure for the electric vehicles, so you've actually got charging points for them. I mean, I live in a flat. Where the hell am I supposed to be charging my vehicle? My flat's not, not near the road. I'm going to have just like a wire going out across the pavement. I mean, people can't do this. I mean, none of it actually works, and none of it was thought through. And it is extraordinary when governments talk about they need to save money, and we're constantly told we need to save money, or people say, well, reforms policies don't add up, or whatever. But just getting rid of net zero, literally flicking your finger and get rid of net zero policies, you are talking about tens of billions of pounds suddenly available that are being spent on nonsense right now.
Well, it could be. I mean, the thing about this target, I mean, if you're going to set yourself a legally binding target to achieve something, you'd think, at the very least, you have some idea of how you're going to achieve it, how much it was going to cost. And
I'm so Ross, what you and your silly ideas.
Had no idea of that at all. They just, nodded through this target, and we ended up beholden to it. And what's going to happen? We're just stuffed really until the.
Oh, you've cut out a bit. We've got you back again. Yes, yeah. We've got you back.
Yeah, until this target is abolished, we are stuck.
Well, but the government, the last Conservative government, and even this government, they're sort of gradually pushing things back in terms of, the ban on certain cars and things like that. But we've already got this particular thing where we are literally forcing manufacturers of cars to subsidise the sale of cars that people don't want. They don't want electric vehicles and charging extra, and they're being fined like like thousands upon thousands of pounds for every car they sell us that we do want. This is, I mean, it's utter madness. And we're building, not enough nuclear power stations, if any at all, or any backup for this, unreliable intermittent energy because of absolute, just ideological zeal. A lot of people, and I see this in the media, they want to blame Ed Miliband. And I think Ed Miliband is ideologically driven on this and is utterly deluded. Proper men in white coats levels of delusion on this. But at the end of the day, this is all being approved by Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, and by the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves. This is on both of them and everybody who voted for this, and that includes the sodding Tories.
Yeah. Here's just a little stat. The National Energy Systems Operator, which I was just talking about, they calculate that the electricity demand for Britain will more than double by 2050 because of all the electric cars, heat pumps, and so on.
AI.
And yeah,
AI demands it. Yeah.
AI is putting an extra demand which they have not factored in.
Brilliant.
And yet, do you know what UK electricity production in the past 25 years has decreased by about a quarter? We're only producing about 75% as much power as we were in the year 2000. And
yet we need more power.
We're importing about 1 in 7 kilowatt hours of electricity used in Britain is now imported.
But
we're
Ross,
becoming more reliant.
The world is a very safe place now. There are no threats from Russia or anything like that. So that won't be a risk to us, will it? I jest.
No,
absolutely
not.
But this is the thing. We are on every conceivable front. But at the same time as, say, pushing this policy, we want to be at the forefront of AI. We have some of the highest energy costs in the whole world. And therefore that makes having an AI based here utterly mad. You're crazy if you're putting your AI factory here, or your body, because you're just going to be paying 4 times as much for your energy as you would in America. It is just extraordinary. The only answer is to drop it all. But by the way, the government has meanwhile got more policies. They're going to be pushing apparently for a ban on petrol and diesel lorries. They're considering in the next net zero drive. And again, that's going to be an absolute disaster. It's going to put the prices up for everybody. They're more expensive. They can't go as far. Massive extension to the time when they can't be on the road. But also, we've even found within government, the government ministers are already getting angry with the fact that they have to have, sometimes they get the electric vehicles, which can't guarantee them a trip from London to Birmingham and back on the same battery. This is all just pie in the sky stuff.
Yeah, well, the electric lorries are a particular worry because the thing is, you put an electric vehicle compared with the petrol diesel equivalent, it is much heavier. And if we're going to be forced to have electric lorries by 2040, that means they'll be able to carry less goods, or you'll have to increase the weight of the lorry.
And you're going to get more potholes.
And they will, yeah.
There we go. The list is endless. Ross, you've been at the forefront of this, pointing out the madness. We've even got government quangos pointing out the madness, and they continue with it. Ross Clark, author of Not Zero. It's such a good book. I cannot recommend it enough. Ross Clark, thank you very much indeed. I get Benedict Spence's thoughts on this. Love to hear your thoughts. Up next, Leila Cunningham from Reform. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. So good afternoon. Welcome back to the show. It's 2 minutes past midday. This is Talk, the home of common sense, and I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, it's fabulous to have your company. Lots to talk about. Lots of you getting in touch on all the big stories of the day. We've been talking about Iran. Should Donald Trump get involved to try and help those protesters? At least 500, probably realistically in the thousands. We're seeing people being brutally shot dead by the Tehran regime. But should Trump take action? If so, what should he do? You're also getting in touch about the shock news in the last hour that the former Conservative Cabinet Minister, former Chancellor, just very briefly, and former Conservative Party Chairman Nadeem Sahawi has defected to Reform. Love to hear more of your thoughts on that. I know a lot of you are Reform fans. Do give us a call on either of those big stories or anything else you want to talk about. Yes, you know, you set the rules on the phone calls. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can get in touch with us on X at Talk TV. You could also, of course, send us a message on WhatsApp. And don't forget, of course, that calls are charged at the national rate. Text cost 1, standard network rate message. Coming up on the show, we are going to be talking more about reform policies. Up next, going to talk to Layla Cunningham. She's set to be the next reform candidate for the London mayoralty. We're also going to be talking about whether or not Elon Musk X, could face a ban in the UK over AI bikini images. Ofcom launched an inquiry into those images themselves today. We're also going to be talking to an academic, Dr. David Harris. He was stripped of a university title after he did his job and criticised critical race theory. Not allowed, apparently, to actually, do your job of being an academic. Plus, the latest royal news. Prince Harry wants King Charles to open his Invictus Games when he returns to the UK. And apparently, guess what? Meghan might want to come back too. Can we have a referendum on that, please? Anyway, all that coming up. Do get in touch. Have your say on all the big topics. 0344 499 1000. Delighted to say, joining me still in the studio today on this miserable cold winter's day when I'm sure the sun isn't shining. I don't know whether the wind is blowing where you are, but I'm not entirely sure how much of the renewable energy we're getting today. But it's Benedict Spence, Conservative commentator, here to provide plenty of hot air.
Yes, speaking of controversial returns, me and Meghan. Which do you prefer, listeners?
Yeah, exactly. I've got to get your thoughts just before we go to our next guest about what Ross Clark was having to say. This extraordinary report from NESO. I mean, it's not a body we hear much about, but this is the National Energy System Operator. It's a government quango, which, by the way, the government they don't even know. They always say, how do we get to net zero? They've actually in the last year asked people to give them ideas on how to get to net zero. They've been kind of charged with part of dealing with this. 4.5 trillion quid. Question: do we have 4.5 trillion quid to waste on net zero?
Oddly enough, no. Oddly enough, I'm not sure anybody has that kind of... I'm not sure they have any amount of money to be wasting on net zero. But, of course, in some ways, this is very reassuring to know that we are still the same superstitious animals that we have always been. We still believe in fairies, and we still believe if you just magically think of something in your head, you can make it happen and that the laws of physics don't matter. Net zero is a religious cult. I'm sorry, it flies in the face of so much established evidence, and for whatever other evidence people will come out about climate change, the actual process of getting to a completely decarbonised grid, it is almost completely impossible. Even if you had 4.5 trillion, it would be almost completely impossible, and it's not desirable. But, of course, in this country, even as the rest of the world abandons it wholesale, we're still sort of happily chugging along because we still believe in fairies.
That's basically what it is. Well, one party that definitely doesn't believe in fairies, they've called it net stupid zero for quite some time, is Reform. Very much in the news today with that defection of yet another former Tory cabinet minister, but also in the news last week with the announcement of Reform UK's candidate for the Mayor of London. That job doesn't come free until May next year, but she's already started her campaigning. I'd like to say she joins us regularly here on the show. Before then, Layla Cunningham. Good afternoon to you.
Hello, Julia. How are you?
Very well indeed. Lovely to finally get you on to talk. Congratulations, by the way. A very good appointment. I think a lot of us were saying about this appointment in terms of you as a candidate. Good communicator. What do you make, though, of your party increasingly taking in what some people are saying are, washed up, old has-been, opportunist Tories to your party when you were supposed to be a party that was standing against not just Labour, but also the Conservatives?
I mean, I wouldn't call Nadeem washed up. He's had.
I didn't say you did.
No, but I mean, I think it's unfair to call him that. He's had a very successful business career, very successful. And he was a cabinet minister. And look, what I think it shows, and it really does, is that the Tories are a sinking ship and they've lost all their conservative values. And you do recognise that there were people in the Conservatives like Nadim, who believed in business, who took a risk and was successful in business, and who believed that the Tories no longer represent that.
He was successful in business. It was his business dealings that also caused him to have to, be sacked from office in 2023.
Yeah, but I don't think any wrongdoing was found. He has been very successful, and I think he recognises that Reform is the party for business. It's the party for Britain, and it's the party that's going to make this country as best as it can be, and that's why so many are coming over.
But is there an element where there's a danger where a party that is supposed to be something different, if you take in, Nadeem Zahawi, Nadine Dorries and many other high-profile figures, that actually you just look like, the Tories with a different coloured rosette, in which case, what's different about you?
I have one answer to that, and that is the leader. I think when we have a leader that the Tories haven't had actually since Margaret Thatcher, a leader that believes in the best for Britain, will do whatever it takes to prioritise this country, and has done in the past. And I think leadership counts for a huge amount. And I think anyone that comes over knows that Nigel's the leader, knows what he believes in, and that there's no one plotting to get rid of him, because we all believe in his leadership, what he believes in, and that's why people are coming over. The Tories haven't had good, strong leadership in decades.
There's an element where a lot of people will still say about your party that it's a one-man band. And look, there are lots of other figures who are regularly out and about, including your good self, and of course, Richard Tice and Zia Youssef and others. But that actually, fundamentally, it's still, what Nigel Farage says is what goes. Is that sustainable in a political party that could feasibly be the next government?
Julia, it's interesting you say that. Nigel is the leader of the party, and I think people have forgotten what leadership means. Leadership means is that he sets the vision, and we're all very happy to follow the vision he sets. And I think why people don't recognise true leadership when they see it is because we haven't seen it in such a long time. We've seen so many different messages coming from the Labour Party or the Conservative Party because they haven't actually seen a real leader in where everyone in the party follows them and believes in their conviction. And so we are more than happy for Nigel to lead us, and we're more than happy for him to take a lot of the attention, because he is the leader of the party, and we have so much to thank him for.
How much do you think is your party? How much are you prepared for? I mean, the avalanche, we're talking earlier, the tsunami, mixing different metaphors of barriers that are going to be put up if you did get into power. Let's assume Reform get a big majority, they're in power. But then you're facing basically, an awful lot of sort of, mainstream media. You're facing the lawyers. You're facing all the other parties trying to make sure you fail. You've got the civil service. We've had a load of civil servants apparently saying over the weekend they would resign rather than working for a Reform government. I think you'd probably say at that point, well, bye-bye, shut the door on the way out, as I would say to civil servants who think they should get a say over who their political masters are. But do you think Reform is, with the help of Zia Youssef and Danny Kruger and others, is Reform going to be prepared to deal with the huge number of barriers from, I suppose, entrenched organisations and people to stop you from doing what you want to do?
Yeah, of course we are, and we're ready for it, and we expect it. And Julia, just to put that into perspective, you have civil servants who are saying that they will go against an electoral mandate. We would have been elected into power, and you have civil servants actively saying that they will go against an elected government. And that is the problem. We are run by civil servants who have a different political agenda and different political priorities to the people that vote.
So what are you going to do about it? I mean, we know that. Tell us something we don't know, Layla.
Well, I mean, we have political parties that are allowing that. So, we are putting everyone on notice, actually, that when we are in government, anyone who tries to undermine a political mandate or the democratic process will not have a say. We believe in democracy, unlike other parties, and we believe in the absolute say of voters, not in anyone else. And anyone else who dares to undermine democracy is going to have a real problem with a reform government.
Okay, let's talk about you and London. We haven't got a London mayoral election this May, but it's the May after. You're sort of getting bedded
May
in.
After.
Oh, it's the May. Okay, long way to go for us London voters. I was quite surprised by the reaction to the news that when you were appointed, and this was announced last week. I personally hadn't realised you were Muslim. I'm largely with you. I'm not really that interested in people's religious views unless they choose or status, unless they choose to tell me it. But you were facing quite a lot of criticism, people that they didn't want. They said, quote, another Muslim mayor of London, with Sadiq Khan, of course, the current Labour mayor, being a Muslim. What did you make of that response?
I mean, some of it was shocking, other bit was understandable. You know, I mean, I think they see a mayor who has worn his religion very openly. You know, we have Eid celebrations, which I don't think have any place to happen in a massive public venue. And I think...
Really? Why not?
Because I think we must all come under a civic, public values of Britain. You know, I think everyone's allowed to celebrate their faith and their traditions privately, but the civic public values and traditions must be British, or else there's confusion and we lose our cultural identity. And I think that's what people feel that in London. People feel that their cultural identity and their values and the way of life in some parts of London is not the same. And perhaps they lay that blame on Sadiq Khan. But I don't want to be known as a Muslim mayor, a Muslim candidate, you know, an Egyptian candidate. I'm British. And that's why perhaps you never knew I was Muslim, because that is a private matter. And it's never something that comes into my politics, because Britain and London is my #1 priority, irrelevant of whatever faith I follow or whatever faith anyone else follows.
Do you think Sadiq Khan's faith, and I was understood to believe that he was you know, fairly wore his Islamic beliefs very lightly, not necessarily secular, but fairly lightly, that his Muslim faith has impacted and affected his policy making in London?
Well, you know, I know that, you know, people don't like Ramadan lights in the streets. And you know what, I can accept that. As again, it's not a Muslim city. We want to celebrate Judeo-Christian holidays. That is the basis of Britain, in London, the capital of the United Kingdom. You know, people don't want to see Eid celebrations.
I'm intrigued by this. I'm an atheist, so you know, I'm just not that bothered either way. I mark the I suppose the Christian holidays because they are the national public holidays of this country. Now, frankly, I'll do anything. If it's got fireworks and chocolate and alcohol, I'm in, frankly. But I think the objection lots of people have is not say that there will be Eid that is celebrated or you know, a Jewish festival celebrated. What people would object to is when the traditional British Christian festivals are ignored or downplayed when other festivals of other minority religions are promoted. Isn't that what people object to more?
Well, that is kind of what I'm saying. I'm saying, you know, we have to celebrate, like you say, the bank holidays, British holidays and British traditions. And I feel that has taken a back seat in London. You know, if I was mayor, I'd have the British flag flying everywhere. I wouldn't be ashamed of it, because for me, British flag it's what unites us, and it unites us against the greatness of Britain. That's why people come here. That's why people choose to move to London.
Would there be politics in the New Year's Eve fireworks? Would you promise us that? No
more
politics?
There'd be a celebration of everything that makes Britain Great Britain. That's what it would be.
But we're told by Labour again and again, including by Keir Starmer in the last week, that one of the things that is a great part of Britain is our diversity.
Yeah, listen, there's a reason why people come to Great Britain, and that's because we are very tolerant and are very accepting, but tolerance doesn't equate submission, right? And when you come to a host nation, you have to be ready to abide by the host nation's values and frankly love the country. And what we've had is the opposite. We've had people who have come and expected the country and the city of London to change for them. And the host nation to change for them, and that's not right.
Okay, just find out, you've been interviewed about the burqa. You've said you would ban the burqa. That's something I think Rupert Lowe had been calling for, something that Zia Yusuf was opposed to. Why would you ban the burqa?
I would ban all face coverings, because to me that is not an open society. It is not if you need to hide your face, then there potentially could be an element of crime. So I would like to see the Met Police treat every face covering as a reason for stop and search. I don't know who's behind that burqa, and I don't know who's behind a COVID mask or a face mask. So I want every face covering to be treated as stop and search.
Okay, that works. I've got to be honest, that works for me. We're all nodding away here. It's interesting, your leader, party leader, Nigel Farage, this morning has said that he's not very keen on banning things. He says that was in relation to the talk that Keir Starmer is looking at a social media ban for under 16s. We've also got talk about banning X, Elon Musk, X, formerly known as Twitter, over these AI images, creating deepfake images of women in bikinis. It's also doing it to young children, to young girls. It's happened to me over the Christmas period. Should Elon Musk clean up his act? Should he face a ban?
Listen, I think Elon Musk. No, absolutely not. I don't think we should ban X. And you know what's been happening with Photoshop on X can happen on many other platforms. I could do that on another AI platform and post it on Facebook and post it on Instagram. Where does it stop? It's obvious, you know, the government obviously has a real issue with X. As I said, you know, that's where real government failures, corruption, hypocrisy is highlighted in real time. And, you know, it worries those that used to control the narrative and can't control it anymore. And that's why they want to ban X. Let's tell it how it is. It's not really for some AI generated. When they don't go after real criminals, they don't go after real sexual offenders, they let them walk free, and they're letting them in at the border. Yet they want to stop X because of AI generated photos that can be on any other platform.
I would appreciate they'd have the same urgency of speed and action when it comes to dealing with grooming gangs as they do with AI images of young women. Just finally, must ask you, the Metropolitan Chief Police has said hit out at what he calls false claims online about the capital's homicide rates. He's saying, look, our murder rate is going down in terms of teenagers who are stabbing each other is going down, and this is not a dangerous city. What would you say to that?
I say that's they're really gaslighting people now, because safety issue in London relates to crime as a whole. Yeah, London homicide rates has dropped. We've never had very high homicide rates in general. I mean, they're in the hundreds, luckily. It's a proliferation of phone theft, robbery, sexual assault, antisocial behavior. That's what makes Londoners feel safe. And just so you know, the investigation rate for homicide is about 94%. Obviously, we have some of the best. The Met homicide unit, some of the best in the world. But for normal offences, it's about 6%. So that's where the system fails. And for them, for Sir Mark Rowley and Sir Sadiq Khan to come out today and say that London is safer because homicide rates is down is really gaslighting people. And I'll tell you that they're comparing us to Chicago. When we're comparing London to Chicago, then we've already lost the argument. That wouldn't happen 15 years ago.
That's a fair point. Very good to talk to you, Leila Cunningham, Reform UK's candidate for the Mayor of London. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Benedict Spence, come back in on whatever you want to and what she had to say there.
There's so much to talk about, because actually she's a very interesting candidate. And as you pointed out, it's very interesting that she's been selected so sort of far in advance so that she can sort of get her feet in the door and people can get to know her. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it, talking about, you know, the criticism she's had basically because she is a Muslim. And I actually think there's an additional element to this, which is that people, as much as Leila Cunningham herself does not play up her Islamic faith, there is a perception that in London you can only win if you're part of a minority. And I think what a lot of people resent is the idea that even if she doesn't play it up, Reform might have selected her because she is outwardly facing a sort of a metropolitan, very educated middle-class woman, but she's also a religion, you know, part of a religion that has very large presence in the capital. And I think what a lot of people suspect, and it may not be true because I think she's a good candidate on her merits, but that she wouldn't have been selected if she wasn't also Muslim, and that therefore there has to be some little thing.
I don't think most people knew she was Muslim.
No, I think a lot of people knew that she was Muslim. Actually, when it was announced, I think that was one of the first things. And this is
I was very shocked by the reaction of some people online. You know who you are.
I think it was very unfair.
I think genuinely, I think it was outright blatant racist.
No, Islam is not a race. It is a religion. It is prejudice. Let's be very clear, because that is part of the way that is always... The Islamophobia laws around this country cannot be compared to anti-Semitism, and that's one of the ways that they get you. But this is... I think it is going to be something that is played up. Even if she doesn't play it up, there will be people who do play it up, because it is significant to a lot of people, because faith is important to a lot of people. And I think the resentment comes... Yes, there are people who are very prejudiced against Islam and prejudiced against women and all sorts of things, but... It's partly because there is a perception that you can only win in London if you belong to some minority.
I tell you what, having worked on my local paper, my training in East End of London, I'll tell you what, there's one thing that local so-called Muslim community leaders, self-appointed men, don't like.
Yes, it's mouthy women.
It's
women with opinions.
Well, uppity women
or jobs,
who
out of the house.
who leave the house. Yes, who leave the house without their husband's permission. But don't worry, certain mosques who've approved the chief constable of the West Midlands would say it was absolutely fine to physically chastise your wife if she left the house without your permission. Yes, I mean, let's face it, it's a world a lot of you boys would like. But anyway, 12:20. Who are we kidding? 12:22 is the time. Up next, we're going to be talking about the latest woke insanity and unfairness. We're going to be talking to a professor who was a professor emeritus at a university, but he lost that title. Why? Because he did his job. That's Dr. David Harris. He's up next. This is Talk.
Esteemed state broadcaster, the BBC, that we all have to pay £180, $220 or so a year by law to fund, was foisting upon us a practising paedophile.
A couple of days before, I was at the Trick Awards because James Well, the guy I used to work with, got a Lifetime Achievement Award, and he was sitting on a table with all BBC executives, and he went up to get a prize, and they all knew this was coming, and they didn't care.
The BBC always tries to cover everything up. That's what they try to keep this a secret, and shame on them.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, welcome back to the show. 12:24 is the time. Let's turn our attention to, well, the latest woke madness. I mean, I could do an item like this every single day. I really could. People who have lost their jobs, lost a title, lost work, been ousted from an organisation simply because, well, they've just said, well, what things that people really think are reasonable, or they've done their job. The latest is Dr. David Harris. He was Professor Emeritus at Plymouth Marjon University until last September, when he was stripped of his academic title. Why? Well, because he'd done some work, he'd done some research, which was his job to do as an academic, looking at critical race theory. That theory which basically says, if you're white, you're a racist, end of, pretty much. And we're all basically in a hierarchy of goodness to badness, and bad definitely among the white people there. But he was stripped of his title, basically because they were of the view that his research had been controversial. But isn't that what academics are supposed to do? Well, let's talk to Dr. David Harris right now, who joins us, former Professor Emeritus at Plymouth Marjon University. Thank you so much for joining us, David.
Well, thanks for your interest.
I just find these stories extraordinary. What was the actual academic work that you did which caused such a storm, it turns out?
Well, I still don't really know. They've been very vague and silent about the offence that I've actually committed. But I've written a book recently, last year, about critical race theory, and just before that, one about feminism. So it could have been either.
Well, how very dare you? I mean, this is, and your subject, I mean, you're an emeritus professor of what?
Well, I'm really a sociologist.
So this is right up your strata. This is literally what you're paid to do.
Yes, I'm not paid by the university anymore. Emeritus professors aren't paid, but they get privileges, including an email address and access to library resources.
So quite vital for your work. And
Well,
what do you suspect they were so unhappy about, particularly with your critique of critical race theory? Because lots of people don't, realise critical race theory is kind of at the absolute, heart of, the Black Lives Matter, this whole idea that there is this hierarchy of people who have power and don't have power, and basically black and brown people, trans people, gay people are at the bottom. White people, white men like you and my colleague in the studio, Benedict, at the top, and everything can be explained by these power dynamics. That's the theory, isn't it?
That is so. There's also an academic core because some of the academics involved in the movement also do research. They do research on racism and its dimensions. They look at schools and the extent to which they favour white kids and penalise various ethnic minorities. Mostly black kids. So that's the sort of work I've focused on. There's been a particularly controversial government report recently, and it's been ignored. So I decided to explore that and the research that was involved in it. So I've mostly focused on that rather than the politics as such.
And basically your views were, your conclusions appeared to be unacceptable. You didn't sort of toe the line of, white people bad, black people good and victims, or whatever nonsense is lately being espoused.
No, certainly not. I'm a rather dull academic, I'm afraid. So I said, well, as you would expect, there's good and bad on both sides in terms of the research, and drawing political conclusions is another matter. It's not easy.
That's not part of your remit. But also, again, there can be aspects, again, where racism plays a role in what happens in universities, schooling, but also, socioeconomic matters, parenting matters, family breakdown, historical. There are so many different aspects. But to even mention that means somehow you're basically challenging this sort of thing. Tell us what it's been like in universities of years, because we've seen this over the trans issue. Just, you simply, we've had professors hounded out of their jobs, death threats and the like, rape threats, horrific stuff, over simply saying, I don't believe that men can become women or women can become men. And critical race theories, it's kind of been wound up with that as these new beliefs that those are the beliefs, and if you don't toe the line on them, you're out.
Well, it's been very difficult. There is a strong argument in some critical race theorists that white people must be racist.
Unconscious bias.
Yes, indeed. And even worse, a kind of philosophical orientation that must be white and empirical and affect the views, including the philosophical views of white people. And this is bound up with the argument about colonization of universities and university academics and academic curricula. And it's very difficult to refute it. And it has led to, as you say, activity against spokesperson who dare to speak up.
Yeah, in my day, it is a long time ago that I was at university. If we disagreed with people, I remember having a debate for about 3 months by essay with a tutor about some philosophical debate about morality. I don't know why students waste their time doing these things, but I did, and he did. But we had a debate. I didn't try and get him banned because I disagreed with him. He didn't try and get me banned because he disagreed with me. We had a debate about it, and in the end we agreed to disagree, but we both put our arguments, and we both really enjoyed, I think, having that debate. And but now, for some reason, people need to be ousted if they say or think the wrong thing. Why? What damage has that done to academia, to freedom of thought, and to rigorous academic debate?
I think it's totally altered academic life. I haven't taught for some years, but I understand that academics these days are treading on eggshells, with controversial matters, and are afraid to speak. And what worries me is that administrators are also encouraging students in their ways, in a way. This is a very convenient way to get rid of inconvenient staff by using student complaints about them or for that matter, junior colleagues are also offended by
everyone's
unpopular
offended.
opinions. Yeah,
tell you what, they're going to hate you even more. You've been on my show.
Well, I was surprised by the amount of hostility in my case. I got some access to some emails as a result of a subject access request, and the hostility and unprofessional sort of comments about me was astounding.
It is extraordinary, isn't it? Well, you've had the backing of the Campaign for Academic Freedom.
I have.
Thank goodness. And we have got bodies like that, and I strongly support them. I mean, again, you don't have to agree with somebody to basically say they have their right to have their say. And if academics aren't allowed to give their views, I'm not sure that academia is going to survive much longer. Really appreciate you standing up for what what you believe in and speaking publicly about it. The more we know about these cases, the more we can try and tackle it. Former Professor Emeritus at Plymouth Marjan University, Dr. David Harris, thank you for joining us.
Very much.
Thank you. Benedict Spencer, these stories, these aren't people going out to cause trouble. It's not someone going, I'm going to stick it up them. It's just like people doing their job, whether it's, students or professors, just doing their job of asking questions and investigating, doing research, writing a book. And they are facing, we've spoken to many, Connie Shaw at Free Speech Union, who basically got thrown out of, basically they tried to throw her out of university for voicing reasonable opinions. Men can't become women. And him about critical race theory.
It's almost darkly amusing, because I remember when I went to school and the lessons of history we were always taught, because it was drilled into us, the Nazis, the USSR to a degree, then back to the Nazis, then a little bit more USSR.
Didn't we do a bit of Elizabethan?
And you were told, oh no, there wasn't enough censorship then. No, but we were told constantly one of the great evils was the censorship, was the suppression. The Nazis burned the books, they kicked out the academics, all the Jewish academics, and then all the others, and the USSR did the same, and that Orwell had warned against all of this thing. And you're kind of thinking, this stuff was beaten into us almost, not literally, because you're not allowed to beat children anymore, but up to that point, this was what we were told. How is it then that people, because these are the same people who went through the same system, are able to have that mental disconnect when they go, oh, that was very bad, we mustn't repeat that, now I'm going to repeat it.
Now I'm going to burn your book.
Yes.
I genuinely, and again, it's people being offended. If you are offended at university by someone having an opinion that differs from yours, you don't deserve at university, you're too thick to be there. It's really that simple, and you need to be told by the university authorities on that day, you can either lose your offence, you can either get over it, or you can pack your stuff and go home, because you are not up to this, because if you haven't got that academic rigour, you don't have any business being at uni. Again, I keep saying this, but we should start. Can that be the new strapline? Not the home of common sense. I'm old-fashioned. I'm old-fashioned, even old-fashioned values, like people being allowed to give their views, and then you argue with them. Thank you very much, Benedict Spencer. We're done with your views now. Now we're going to be telling you about how you could be in with a chance of winning a trip of a lifetime to San Francisco. Talk is giving away flights, a 3-night stay at 4-star Intercontinental Hotel, and £2,500 spending money, plus tickets to the Super Bowl to top it all off. Listen to how you can enter.
For your chance to win, text TALK to 83338. Text costs £2.50 plus your standard network rate, or call 0343 418 7260. Lines close 22nd January 2026, 4 p.m. That's when you'll need to answer your phone if it rings. 18 plus, UK residents only. This is a network promotion. Full T's and C's at talksport.com. So for your chance to win, text TALK to 83338 now.
Very, very good luck. You don't want to miss out on that trip of a lifetime. I'm going to take a quick break. Up next, we're going to be talking about, threats to Elon Musk and X, threats to stop children getting screen time, you name it. We're going to be talking about that up next.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, welcome back to the show. We're going to try and squeeze some calls in before the top of hours. We're going to get to some latest royal news and also talk about, Lord Mandelson. Apparently, look, he didn't know anything about Jeffrey Epstein. His close pal, his best pal, he wrote, and all these are underage girls that were being sexually abused and raped by him because he was gay. It's a great defence. It's an interesting defence. Not sure it would hold up in a court of law. No one's accusing him, Mandelson, of any wrongdoing, of course, but you'd think that someone might notice when there are a load of young girls hanging around a man who's got no kids and no reason to have a load of 13, 14, 15-year-old girls hanging around his home. But there we are. What can you say? I'm just untrusting like that. Anyway, let's talk right now about what is going on in, the online world, because it does affect the, real world. Let's talk to John Carr, OBE. He's Secretary of the UK Children's Charity Coalition on Internet Safety, about, all of the latest big stories are coming, talking to about social media. John Carr, thank you for joining us.
Hi there.
There are so many different stories today. I don't even know where to start. But let's just start, first of all, with Ofcom, who've announced today they've launched a formal investigation into X, formerly Twitter, of course, and their AI tool Grok, over it being used to create sexualised images of women and children. I just want to show you an image. I put an image out, myself and my husband, over my Christmas holiday in Thailand, and someone decided to try and unpixelate a picture of my husband, but they also decided to ask Grok to put me in a bikini. Interestingly, not my body, put me in nail varnish and changed my face as well, which was a bit weird. The whole thing is very, very weird. Now, I'm not sort of traumatised by that, because I can absolutely understand how maybe an 18-year-old would be, and I've certainly seen images where they've put little girls into bikinis as well. Grok has done it at the request of users. Who's at fault there, and what should Ofcom, if anything, or the government do about it?
Well, there's no question that Grok X has the technical capability to detect that kind of activity and stop it. And in fact, I mean, if you remember what Elon Musk has done, is he said, well, we're not allowing anybody who's not paying us any money to do it anymore, but you can still do it if you pay us a subscription. That's a completely inadequate answer. Now, the interesting...
So it's okay to put an 8-year-old in a bikini, again, in a deep fake, if you pay money for it. I mean, I think we used to have a word for that.
They did. They've probably got a new one now, but I know what you mean. And you're right, it's completely disgusting and unacceptable. But it underlines, the point is not just X, but all of these big online platforms, they're earning billions and billions of dollars. They're funding some of the richest, most powerful companies that have ever existed. And they've got a huge amount of technical knowledge, but they just don't, these things are not important enough. They're not a priority for them. And so kids suffer, and it's no longer acceptable.
But this is the thing, isn't it? They constantly say, it's too hard, we wouldn't be able to stop it. There are billions of different images created all the time. We can't get involved. They have algorithms, they have the technology. They could stop this tomorrow if they really wanted to, couldn't they?
Absolutely, no question about it.
And is it illegal? Is it illegal for someone to create a deep fake image that purports to be me? Or does Grok deliberately change my face so I can say, so I'm not bothered because it doesn't look like me, it's not my face. So I'm not supposed, so I can't then take action. Or is creating a sexualised image, and I think a woman putting out a picture in a dress and then being put in a bikini is sexualising the image against her will. Is that a criminal offence?
It's not, apparently, and there is a bill in Parliament at the moment that will change the law, but apparently at the moment it's not illegal actually to create the image or to ask Grok to create the image or another AI tool, but you would be breaking the law if without the person's consent, and obviously it had to be the recognisable person, if you were to distribute it.
Which is crazy, isn't it, really? Where do we draw the line, though, on this? Because there's a balance, isn't there, between people's freedoms, and that's where we also draw the line. We have a difficulty in drawing the line over social media bans. Now, Kemi Badenoch, possible, who knows, one day, future leader of the Labour Party, Andy Burnham, and a teaching union have come out today and said very clearly they think there should be a ban for access to social media for under 16-year-olds, in the same way that under 6-year-olds aren't allowed to do lots of other things in this country as well. But how do we? That's something I think I would support. I don't think that kids should be on social media. I don't think they should have smartphones at that age. But how do we do that without actually impacting what adults can do in the same way?
Well, the answer to that is very simple. You insist on proper age verification. And, you know, I know people say you can beat these systems. It's very hard to beat some of these systems. Again, it's a question of will. It's a question of the determination on the part of the companies to do it. But we're going to see, I mean, Australia's, on the 10th of December, Australia introduced a ban on under 16s using social media. We're going to learn lessons from it. But it's quite clear there is a groundswell of opinion across the world. I can't think of a single country in the world where this debate isn't taking place. Yeah. People have had enough. And even if the science isn't all scientific research isn't already there, there's enough misgivings and enough common sense to tell us what's going on now is not acceptable. Something has to be done. We may not get it right first time, but doing nothing is not an option.
And that's the thing, you know, didn't stop me. You know, there's laws against buying alcohol under 18 or buying cigarettes under 16 when I was younger, now 18 now. That doesn't stop a bunch of youngsters, including myself when I was a teenager, from getting a drink or the others getting cigarettes or drugs or anything else. Laws don't work perfectly. However, they do perhaps send a message and a signal to parents. One of the issues has been, hasn't it, about parents saying, look, I don't want my kid to be sitting there on TikTok or wasting their time on YouTube, all of these things. But what can I do when every other kid in the class is on these things and all the social arrangements are made on Snapchat or whatever it is there? Whatever I'm saying, it won't be that now. It'll have moved on from the last week. But if every other kid in class is doing it, my kid will be left out. So is this a way of basically helping parents to do what a lot of parents would like to do anyway?
A lot of parents who weren't brought up in the internet age, they don't feel very confident or knowledgeable about these things. So yes, we ought to be helping parents more to help their children. Every good parent wants to help their child avoid trouble and avoid hazards. But if you don't, but a lot of parents, I've never been one of them, are worried about looking stupid in front of their kids or looking awkward or whatever, and so they don't engage in the way that perhaps they could and should. But underlying your earlier point is right on the money. Tech companies have created a new culture. They've created a space where kids feel, oh, I've got to be there or else I'm the weirdo. I'm the one who's left out. All that does really is emphasize the responsibility that the tech companies have to try and make those environments as safe as they possibly can be.
I mean, I certainly think parents, nothing stopping parents from saying, right, phones, 9 o'clock, no phones at the table, none of all that. I think that's just a failure of parenting a lot of the time. But here's the thing. I'm a free speech campaigner. I'm not an absolutist. I don't like an awful lot of stuff that's online, whether for adults or not. I think most people are absolutely deluded about what their kids are doing online, what their kids are seeing, the pornography, the violence, the horrors they're seeing online, the algorithms that are driving them to, whether it's, trans stuff, whether it's to suicide, anorexia, you name it. It's absolutely horrible. I think most parents have got their heads in the sand on this. But as much as I want to protect children, and I don't think children have the same rights as adults, I also do not trust the authorities to quote, use protecting children in a way that would not impact on adults' rights to move free freely. I don't want to be inundated with horrible, violent pornography, but I also don't trust the government or the authorities, including Ofcom, to decide what I can and can't see, because they were doing that during COVID. They did that doing that a lot of social media companies over things like the trans issue, stopping people saying factual things like whether you agree with it or not, it's a fact. Men can't become women and the like. So my trust in the authorities is completely wiped out now in terms of them being able to be a trustworthy organisation to actually protect us in the right way. What do you say to people like me?
Well, ultimately, these things will be tested in the courts. And if the authorities have overstepped the mark, if they are blocking access to legal material, if they are interfering with people's free speech rights, then the courts will strike it down. So
we don't have a right to free speech in this country. It's not written down anywhere.
We do have a right not to have our access to information improperly restricted. So the question ultimately is whether
hold on a minute. But that happened during COVID, and no one did anything.
You've obviously followed the issue more closely than I have.
That's what I'm saying. A lot of people don't realise how much our information was shut down.
Yeah, but ultimately it's a question of, do you have faith in our courts to enforce the law?
I don't think people do anymore.
No, I do. When I don't think I've yet reached the point where I've given up completely on a liberal democracy and the idea of the rule of law.
No, I haven't given up completely on that. I just, yeah, I genuinely, having had a formal apology from the government for what they did to me during that period, accusing me of disinformation when I wasn't. I no longer trust the social media companies or the government or the authorities at all. I just don't, because I've seen it's happened to me. It's really interesting to talk to you, John. Thank you so much. John Carr, I hope you'll come back again. John Carr is Secretary of the UK Children's Charity Coalition on Internet Safety. Benedict Spence, this is a really difficult debate. Some people I know and I've lots of groups on WhatsApp, don't want any restrictions whatsoever. I do think there's a need for some restrictions for children. I just don't know how you have restrictions for children which don't then impact on adults.
I mean, the thing is, if we're talking about things like social media access, then I'll say what I've said many times before, which is actually the onus is on the adults to restrict the access to the children. When it comes to things like Grok and social media like that, once you're actually sort of through that looking glass, then I do think it's going to be things like identifying yourself, which of course a lot of people are going to feel very squeamish
Once you identify yourself,
I get it, but that we have to have...
If you have to identify yourself, the government can then use that to stop people getting access.
They can, and this is, I think, the tricky thing. But I also think it's slightly beholden on the government to be aware of what kind of society they live in. Let's be clear here. We do not live in Iran or China or a country where you're able to just turn off the internet and expect there to be no repercussions at all. It's not just anything else, because the government hasn't been spending the amount of money it should have done on basic services like the police or the armed forces, so they couldn't enforce that anyway.
We wouldn't have known in the last 2 weeks about protests in Iran from mainstream media. I only saw it on X.
And this is, I'm afraid, the big takeaway, because lots of people complain about X, they complain about Elon Musk and all that. I'm sorry, it has done more to democratize information than just about any other sole platform. And I understand lots of people don't want everybody to have full access to information, but that's the problem. People will get it either way, and X is really good at doing that.
Very, very interesting. Thank you very much indeed. Let's go to a couple of quick calls before we go to a break. Paul is in Southampton. Paul, you want to talk about that West Midlands police chief and over that ban on the Maccabi Tel Aviv fans. What do you want to say?
Hello, Julia.
Hello.
I actually listened to some of the actual inquiry, and I thought the questions asked were pathetic.
The Home Affairs Select Committee.
Yeah, and their answers were, and I just thought, really, this is just so bad.
But apparently they're going to issue a report telling the Home Secretary that he needs to be fired. They were very gentle with him, but they know, they're sitting there going, this guy's lying.
Yeah. But the caveat which really got me, if this man's allowed to sit there and lie in Parliament, then what about the other chief constables around the country in respect to the grooming gangs?
Well, in respect to everything. Inspect everything. If a chief constable is willing to lie about this and then lie about his lies, I, as far as I'm concerned, if I was a lawyer for anybody who's been put away while this guy has been chief constable, I'd be appealing on the basis that you can't trust anything this police body can actually say, because you can't trust. If the head guy is now a proven liar, and he is, then it's an unsafe conviction.
Yeah, there is no, there's no safety for anybody, and if the top echelons of the police can be manipulated by a minority and a religious group, then my God, where is this going to lead?
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more, Paul. It's why we talked about it every single day since this story's come into the news. Paul, thank you so much. Let's go to Brian, who is in London. Brian, I'm going to have to keep this really brief because, as always, I'm way over time. But you want to talk about both Nadeem Zahawi coming over from the Tories to Reform, and also Layla Cunningham, who's the new Reform candidate for London Mayor.
Hello, Julia. Layla Cunningham got a perfect, great vote winner for her, and that is to scrap the 20 mile an hour speed limit.
Oh, God, yes.
I meet a lot of people, and I've never met one that says 20 mile an hour at 2 o'clock down the Marylebone Road is a good. And it's not. It's a new tyranny of safetyism.
Yes. I don't mind 20 mile per hour around schools. Absolutely. I would say that's too far. That's too high sometimes at 3:30 in the afternoon.
Well, you put like in America, you put loads of lights up, and you only do it during school time.
Yep.
There are ways to protect schools.
Yep.
But what they're doing is they're culling drivers. And there's 850 tickets in London last year.
Yeah.
That's 85 million to Khan to waste on it.
Yeah,
now, I mean, so it's
no, I love that policy. We'll put that to. I'm gonna have to be really naughty. Call me again tomorrow. I'm gonna have to go. I've got to go to a quick break before we talk to Rupert Bell. Thank you so much for calling in. Love that policy. This is Talk.
Our esteemed state broadcaster, the BBC, that we all have to pay £180, $220 or so a year by law to fund, was foisting upon us a practising paedophile.
A couple of days before, I was at the Trick Awards because James Well, the guy I used to work with, got a Lifetime Achievement Award, and he was sitting on a table with all BBC executives, and he went up to get a prize, and they all knew this was coming, and they didn't care.
The BBC always tries to cover everything up. That's what they try to keep this a secret, and shame on them.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Afternoon, welcome back to the show. Last few moments of the show, delighted to say Rupert Bell joins us, Talk's royal correspondent. Afternoon to you, Rupert.
Afternoon, Julia.
Thank you so much for joining us. Sorry, it's going to be short and sweet, but as always, Prince Harry back in the news. He wants the King to open the next Invictus Games, and his wife Meghan apparently is talking about coming back this summer. I hope not for good.
Well, coming to on an anniversary, the one-year anniversary before the Invictus Games, which takes place next year in Birmingham, and she's done this before, but the frustrating thing at times for the Invictus Game organisers is when she appears, she overshadows everything else because the story becomes about her. And that will be the worry for the Invictus Games organisers. The King, the relationship with the King and Harry is at all times turning everything into a soap opera. And really, the Invictus Games, it's a distraction, this whole thing. So in many ways, you want the Harry and the King to have sorted out their relationship, because you would expect the King to go to something like the opening of the Invictus Games next year. It would be standard, almost normal royal protocols.
That would, I mean, and that would be a good way. You know, it's something worthwhile. It's something that we all, we all approve. That was what we liked Harry when he set up the Invictus Games, isn't it? I mean, it is absolutely fascinating that it's still ongoing. I mean, it's interesting at the weekend we saw these reports that Prince William has basically hired a sort of a crisis management PR specialist to deal with basically all the ongoing fallout, whether it's about Harry and Meghan, whether it's about Prince Andrew, or the artist formerly known as Prince Andrew, and his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. And none of this stuff is going away.
Yeah, and this is the problem for the royal family. They have got to get on the front foot, but every time they try, the Andrew story seems to have another twist to it. He is, I think, definitely the low-hanging fruit, whatever you say. And Peter Mandelson's interview wasn't quite in the Prince Andrew class yesterday, but you feel he was, there were some similarities, you feel. But at the same time, for the royal family, they do need to try and get on the royal right foot and get in terms of public opinion, just some distraction from the Harry soap opera saga, the Andrew problems, and that's the difficulty for the royal family. So you can see why William's done it.
Well, when it comes to Harry and Meghan, I always feel a little bit of ashamed when we're talking about it all, because it's like, oh, why am I doing it? And yet they are endlessly fascinating. What can I say? But it's really interesting. Again, even when, say, it's about someone else's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, in the case of Lord Manderson speaking for the first time in an interview on the BBC yesterday, where he declined to apologise to victims of Jeffrey Epstein, but basically justified things. You know, basically, well, I was a gay guy. I'm a gay man. I wasn't aware of what was going on. This was obviously a separate part of Jeffrey Epstein's life. But it's interesting. It always still gets linked back to Prince Andrew, because we all remember that Newsnight interview, and we know this is a man who's, you know, he's basically, you know, lost his title and his home and his all his, you know, royal trappings because of that relationship and his lies about it. Well, Lord Manderson's lost his job as the UK ambassador to the US, but hasn't lost much else. Yeah, I know, and we described Epstein as his best pal. And yesterday apparently he was just on the periphery. He was best pal in the letter he wrote to him, but he's in an email, but he's just a periphery figure now. Well, and this is where all the grey areas, and sometimes Andrew just seems to be the easy one to beat endlessly with the problems, because there's all in America, it seems to be covering up, will these letters, what will they reveal? And Andrew just does seem to be the easy victim here. I'm not agreeing with any of his action. But in terms of probably a wrong choice. He's up to his eye, but I know. He's up to the eye. You know where I'm coming from. He's the focal point, because we've all heard of him, and also because it's very and he paid 10 million quid to a woman he'd never met, over allegations she made against him. What do you make of that defence, though? I'm gay man, so I wasn't aware. I just didn't see anything. If I'd known that these young women were being treated this way, I would have done something, but I didn't know. Do you believe that? He thinks he does protest too much. Rupert Bell, Talk to our correspondent. Thank you very much indeed. Maybe bring Benedict Spence in on this. I mean, it's just not even remotely believable that Peter Mandelson had no idea that his best pal, his words, not ours, Jeffrey Epstein, had a proclivities for underage girls, and there were underage girls hanging around all of his homes at all times.
I think Peter Mandelson once had a brilliant mind, and it's starting to run out of steam if this is the calibre of excuse that he's coming up with. Once upon a time, you would have relied on him to come up with something a little bit more creative, maybe have had a little bit more. But now excuses,
he wouldn't have lost 3 jobs for his own personal
lost the 3 jobs, but he got them in the first place, and he kept on getting them despite everything that went before.
I'm telling you,
very smooth operator.
He'll be given another top job at some point.
Almost certainly. It comes around like death and taxes, and Peter Mandelson being back in government.
I think he is genuinely very, very brilliant, but I also think, as I say, he's never met a dodgy billionaire he didn't like, same as Andrew. But I mean, do you think that he just must know where some bodies are buried?
I mean, possibly, but I've not met any dodgy billionaires. Maybe when I meet them, I'll like them as well. Who knows?
He hates me, Peter Mandelson. He hates me.
That's because you're not a billionaire.
Yeah, I know. If only I was a dodgy billionaire, he'd love me.
That sounds like a you problem.
Ian Collins is here. He came on the show in the last year, but he hates me.
I remember seeing him jump on he walked out of this